Welcome to the Independent Characters, episode 239. This is Carl.
This is Josh.
And we are joined by a very special guest, Dave Taylor. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us.
Cool. No, I'm
super appreciate
super excited. It's always cool. I have never been on a Show of Force episode before, so
yeah.
I'm
Well,
nervous.
listen,
I'm super nervous.
now you know when I think Leagues of Votann, I think Dave Taylor.
That's right.
This episode is a Show of Force on the Leagues of Votann. And so we'll be going, if you don't know what Show of Force is, it's an overview of the entire army. It's not a unit by unit depiction of the army. We don't, as we've said forever, we don't do codex overviews on the independent characters, but we do go into the lore, what it means to the game, some units, the models, blah, blah, blah. We'll go through everything we know at this point, which is some stuff, but not as rich as some armies out there. Well, listen, thank God we have a dissenting opinion on that, Dave. So.
And I was just going to say, for the uninitiated, Dave, you want to give a little elevator pitch on who you are for those that are new to the hobby and don't know of you for the last 40 years?
I ran into somebody recently that I said, well, Dave Taylor's going to be, he's like, who's that? And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Wow.
Well, let me tell you.
Cool. Yes, I'm Dave Taylor. I've been into the miniature painting, wargaming hobby since 91, however many years that is, 33 years, I guess. I have worked in the toy soldier business for a long time, since 94, for Games Workshop, for Battlefront miniatures on Wargames Illustrated, and for the last 10 years I've had my own business called Dave Taylor Miniatures. And most recently, I've been doing a bunch of publishing. So
you're publishing the Art of series books.
Yeah.
Which are just gorgeous. I think you just ended a Kickstarter for the most recent.
That's right. So I super perfect timing. I'm not able to promote the Kickstarter that's just finished, and we haven't got the backer kit yet.
I know.
Go and check it out.
I know. I'm sorry.
We're right in the middle, but it's all good.
Well, we will have you on before the promotion of the next one, because these books are fantastic, and one of my favorites, Sam Lenz, is in the recent batch. So I'm looking forward to that. So
absolutely.
Additionally, you do a podcast, a live show, but then put it out called Build, Paint, Play.
Yep.
Which Josh and I were on not too long ago. But tell us a little bit about that.
So Build, Paint, Play. So a buddy of mine, Jake Krajewski, Oz, runs a store in Boston called Alpha Omega Hobby. And at one point he was just like, I'd like to do like a lore podcast or a hobby podcast or something like that. And I was like, yeah, I'd be into that. So we fumbled our way through, we've fumbled our way through 4 seasons. We're only up to 80 episodes. We're not 200, almost 240 episodes, but we're getting there.
We had to take breaks every now and then. I should have done seasons.
Yeah. Seasons are definitely the way to go. We do a 20 episode season. We talk about all sorts of things, miniature gaming related. We have guests on, folks who have podcasts like yourselves. We have game designers. We have professional painters. We have sculptors. All sorts of stuff. Different folks who are part of the miniature wargaming sort of industry. And we talk about all that sort of stuff. Another recent episode we had Hank and Matthias on from Adepticon. So we could chat with them after my visit to Milwaukee with them to check the new venue. So,
boy, that got me more excited than ever. I mean, we had already talked to Hank and Matt anyway, but that got me even more excited about this upcoming Adepticon. So I know the hotel block's open later this month. I've already got it in my calendar, set an alarm in my phone. I've got the whole 9 yards.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely going. So, I missed it last year. Speaking of which, I'm wearing my Australia hat today in support of you.
I appreciate that. I'm wearing my Build Play shirt in support of my live stream.
Nice.
Good.
I'm wearing my
Good.
Independent Characters logo and shirt, which you actually can't see on this
It's
camera.
here.
Yeah. Well, I was
On the
getting my name, but
and on the back. Cool. All right. Well, as we mentioned, the other thing I need to mention real quick is our Patreon sponsors for the episode are Ed Abshire and Sean Morgan. Thank you so much for your support, your continued support. We definitely appreciate it. It's a real big help to Josh and myself. Additionally, special thanks to Andrew Bowles for sending us amazing backdrops for our game. We had talked recently about we'd love to take photos of our games, but have like a backdrop behind the thing. And it's kind of pricey to do, on card stock and whatnot. And Andrew works for some kind of printing situation where he was able to deliver to us these massive, and they're huge.
it's 1
things
meter
that we
by
can put,
2 meters
that we can put on board, and they look fantastic. Josh did some of the graphic stuff on it, and they look awesome. Ruined cities behind
Fantastic.
what we're gonna do. So
yeah, I can't wait for our next game. So you'll see lots of photos of this in
yeah.
action in the Facebook group when we play again.
You'll probably get bored of the same destroyed city.
No, you never get bored.
Okay. So with that, why don't we move on with the show and get us into our elite choice? So, not what I meant to do. Those listening on audio, welcome to the joys of a video. Yay. Okay, here we go. So let's move into our elite choice for this week, and thank you so much for joining in on the fun, Dave. But my elite choice was Seth Hancock and his display board for his Tyranids, which is massive. I mean, it's basically the size of a game board, and I love the desert terrain, the desert looking mechanical components to the terrain. I love the bushes that are added to it. I just love the whole thing. I love the whole presentation. It's super thematic. And recently I was involved in a discussion about how do you lay out your terrain for games and whatnot. And, I lean heavily towards making it fair and balanced, but not necessarily a mirror match of terrain on a table. And so this is so thematic. That's the theme I always heavily lean into when I pick my elite choices, or excuse me, when I set up my boards. And so this just really spoke to me in that regard.
Yeah, it's really cool with the kind of the jungle-esque terrain coming out. It's almost like an oasis, like a desert oasis, but time has obviously taken its toll, and the weathering on the terrain elements included in there, I really, really like kind of that yellow, rusty weathered look, which just mashes so nicely with the desert board.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. And you can see the size of it is pretty large. It's not quite the size of a game table, but it's at least 3.5 feet long by probably 2.5 feet wide. Oh yeah, it'd be a big kill team game. It'd be a big kill team game. Josh, let's move into yours.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went with Neil Tweed, and I have largely associated Neil Tweed with his Votann, his Leagues of Votann army that he's been working on, which are those gorgeous kind of purple and white ones. I don't remember which league that is, but Neil is actually, according to our Facebook conversation, he's actually primarily an Eldar player first and foremost, and he has a Warlock Conclave that he's been working on here, which are on the kind of the Altiac scheme here, just beautiful blues and yellows, and really, really nicely done. Three Warlock jet bikes here. They're the Sky Runners, and just an amazing. I love the texture of the blue in there. It's kind of got like that sponged on effect there.
Stippling or sponge.
Yeah,
I love that look.
It's just beautifully done. And everything I've seen from Neil has been gorgeous, and this is no exception. So job well done.
And the yellows, like the shading of the yellows to the oranges is just fantastic. It's
absolutely.
It's just such a tricky color I find to work with. But man, he's knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love the subtlety of that stippling on the canopies, and it just helps it stand out. It helps that yellow pop even more. You're not looking.
Oh, that's a good point.
There, you're looking.
Yep, absolutely.
Subtlety. Yeah, really nice.
Yeah. And then Dave.
Yeah, my choice, my league choice this week was Blaze Kunopaski. I'm going to go with that. So,
listen, you gave it your best effort. I think that was a good one.
Sorry, Blaze. So yeah, this is as a publisher myself, publish 12 to 15 books depending on when you look on publishing dates. But so he's taking Blaze is taking an old Rogue Trader book that has been in a 3-ring binder for the last possibly 30 years. And doesn't have a cover, but is going through and combining this with his other hobby of book binding. So I'm thinking the book binding is a new hobby, relatively new, but to be able to take this book now and put it back into a perfect bound sort of situation and create their own cover for it is going to be just a super cool project. And give such connection to the origins of 40K.
There's another individual, I don't think it's Blaze, but there's another individual in our group that has a relative that does book binding. And one of the things that I was talking about was getting my first edition. I have copies of my first edition Player's Handbook, DM's Guide, and Monster Manual. I have extra copies of it, and I'm getting all those bound into one beautiful covered book as one giant book. And he's kind of offered, and I'm like, I can't really spend money on this at the moment. I'd love to do it, but sometime in the future. But man, but I think I've found more and more like YouTube videos about book binding and stuff, and I find it fascinating how much effort goes into it.
Yeah.
So this is really cool.
It is super impressive. I a couple of a month or so ago, you had the 40K rarities. I might have to talk to you about coming on for another one in the future, but that you haven't talked
absolutely
yet. But all of those, the limited edition books, I've got all the Primarch books and that kind of thing. I didn't go for the Siege of Terror books, so I knew that they would be crazy. But
smart man.
Yeah, all of the binding on those and the covers and the special work that's put into that is great. And the idea that you could do that yourself to create a unique volume.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you had the tenacity to go through and take the non-special editions, you could turn them into even more special editions,
extra special.
Yep.
And you wouldn't have had to worry about the collecting thing that I had to. God, never again. Never again.
And it would be one of one instead of whatever, one of 1,000. So
yeah,
that's right.
That's
right.
But yeah,
that's right. So let's leap right from that into our hobby progress. And Dave, we're going to start with you since you're our honored guest. So walk us through what you've been working on, man.
Okay. So I paint a lot, and I've been working on a lot of different things. I like to have like 5 or 6 projects on the go at once, so I can switch between them as needed. So yeah, these ones. This is a unit of Inquisitorial Henchmen. So I've been working on an Imperial Agents force. So this one's got a bunch of models from the Inquisitorial Henchman Kill Team box set. So
gorgeous.
There's the Imperial Guard veteran. There's the guy at the front with the plasma pistol and the book. There's that auto savant with the 2 quills.
Which is super scribe guy. I always love that guy.
He's awesome. It's such a cool model.
From the art.
Yeah.
The
model.
It's really cool to see that model brought to life because the art is so. I don't know. It's just, that one's stuck with me for the last 30 years. So seeing it come to life is awesome.
Definitely awesome. But one of the things with the Inquisitorial Henchman thing is essentially they're all the same. It doesn't matter what the models are equipped with, really, apart from 1 or 2 of them. So they count as having like henchman weapons, henchman close combat weapon, or henchman gun. Kind of.
Right.
So
nice.
The rest of that unit is made up of Hexbane's hunters from Underworlds. So the two dogs at the front.
Oh, neat.
The model on the right-hand side there with the crossbow. The one on the left with the two pistols. And there's a guy at the back with the big armor up around his shoulders. He's carrying a launcher and a sword. They're all converted from Hexbane's hunters. So,
all right, hang on a second. I want to stop for a second because earlier you said you paint a lot, and I have to tell you, I sat in on your live Build Paint Play Tale of Four Warlords wrap up.
Yep.
So Tale of Four Warlords, for those who don't know, is typically I think it started originally in White Dwarf.
Yeah, Tale of Four Gamers.
Yeah, and it was hey, we're all gonna paint up an army or a set size of force over a period of time, and you get to watch the progression and whatnot.
Yeah.
And you did this with 3 other individuals who are going to remain unnamed for the moment. Because it was so funny as I watched this. I think I was talking to Josh about this as I watched, everybody was like, "Okay, well, here's what I got," and this isn't done yet, and this is the finale, and and I'm going here and I'm doing this, and meanwhile, and then it comes to Dave, and Dave's like, "Here's what I've done." And it just keeps going. Like, here's what I've done. And then, it was 2,000 points, but here's my 3,500 points of, I'm just
the stretch goals of Tale of Four Warlord.
Yeah.
Gorgeously painted.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this is nuts. So to say that you paint a lot is yes.
Yeah.
And
you're
you
prolific.
paint a lot.
And it's gorgeous. It's all gorgeous.
It's what I do to center myself, really. When I'm sitting here painting, it's just like the hours can fly by. I'll just keep.
I could see that. So anyway.
So yeah, I've got those models just finished off.
All right. Well, let's go back to your stupid inquisitorial warband that looks amazing.
Yeah.
And
using
then let's go
the
on
Underworlds too as the base of those conversions, like they fit in so well, and that's such a natural thing for inquisitorial henchmen. Like really well done. Like just a little bit of tech bits that you added to fantasy miniatures. They fit in perfectly. So job well done. Of course, and
God, these are
I don't
amazing.
have to tell you, but they look great.
Thank you. Yeah, there's
incredible
warbands that I'm going to mess around with and convert bring into this army. These models here are the Navy breaches. One or two other Necromunda. Oh, I think there's a Necromunda model in there as well. But I painted up some of these.
Are those the Enforcer helmets from Necromunda?
Yeah. The Enforcer helmets on the Necromunda, on the Navy breaches.
Dude, you are just you have an eye for kit bashing things that go well together, and it's there. There is an art form to that. And it's incredible. I wouldn't have thought to put some of these things together, and then I see this, and I'm just amazed. I'm just amazed. You know what we're gonna do too is we'll take these pictures from this for those who don't watch this visually, and we'll make a post in our Facebook group just so people can go back and look because these are incredible.
The
absolutely
having a uniform color scheme or a connecting color scheme, like a thread that runs through a group,
and draws it all together
is sort of some of the key things there. But I had fun with this one because there's the guy at the front left. There is supposed to be the demolitions model, but I didn't want to use. I've got another model that's sort of done up with. He's holding this bundle of dynamite or whatever. So this one, I just wanted that dynamite to be on the little cat device that comes with them. So I used the piece of.
It's good to see the Space Hulk cat getting multiple spots, and this is actually from the Breachers now, but it originated in Space Hulk.
I kept it on a 25 mil round, and so I extended the base a little bit with one of those pieces from the. I can't remember what sprue it's from, but one of the basing sprues, and
so good.
Sort of stuff. But they come along well. I still occasionally do a little bit of commission painting. and one of my clients has a big. I've been working on his Boomspot Gitz army actually his whole destruction army for a long time. And so yeah, we've got a dank old Troggoth on the left, and Trog, the Troggoth King, I think is the name of the model.
I don't know the army very well, but again, these are just gorgeous.
Yeah,
just
fun
gorgeous.
with playing with different colors and different things there. With the goal with Trug, the guy on the right there, was to make sure that the focus for everything was that face. So
yeah. Because it can get kind of lost in the model a little bit if you're not careful.
Yeah, so much going on. Yeah. The wanted to make sure that the so basically everything are towards the outside, like so his arms and his hands become very dark towards the end of those.
Yeah.
Compared to the very bright sort of face.
Yeah. That makes sense. The highlighting of it. Yeah. Okay.
So yeah.
And then what are these
achieved?
And these guys are. I'm working on these for a Sludge army. So Sludge is a game written by Sean Sutter, who's not too far from you guys.
Also does what's Relic Blade? Yeah, which is a great little skirmish game.
Yeah. So Sludge is a slightly larger game. I think probably end up with about 30 or 40 models in a game of Sludge.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't played a game just yet. We're still working on the models, but all of these were digitally sculpted by Sean, and he sells them as STLs. So I bought the STLs, printed them, and have been painting them up.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
The guy on the far left with the spear, I love the pose.
Yeah, that's great.
Absolutely love the pose. It's like charging with the spear. That's incredible.
It is.
That's incredible.
Definitely neat.
Yeah, I've played a little bit of Relic Blade with Sky of Herrick Games, one of our sponsors. But and I met Sean at Adepticon actually, even though he's somewhat local to us. But that's a really fun little game too. Yeah. There's just too many games in too little time.
We had Sean on the show a week or two after Adepticon, and it was like, this is that night. I was like, okay, I'm going to go away. I'm going to buy the PDFs. I'm going to buy the STLs. I'm going to start printing. And it's going along nicely.
He's such a pleasant guy,
my favorite episodes from this season you guys did too, besides the one we were on, obviously. But just the artistic philosophy of him talking about game design and stuff was really, really wonderful. So definitely recommend that for anybody who hasn't listened.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, Josh, what have you been working on?
Yeah, this looks familiar. First thing I did is the Necromunda Outcast gang. I put finishing touches on it. So this is very similar to the photo that I showed last time, but you'll notice there's some additions with power weapons. Just clean them back. I pulled them back a little bit. I took the power weapons a little too far, and then I just wanted to add some blood effects, which you'll see better in the next photo here. Of just love this as the kind of the technique that I developed with the Sharkadons, but adding the blood and gore to weapons. You want to go to the next photo there, Carl? And
you can really see the gore you put on the chain swords.
A little bit of splatter, a little bit of the gory meaty bits. And this is using Tamiya clear red and some black ink to get more of the gory bits and just kind of stippling it on there. Just adding a little bit of character.
Dave, do you notice that the center model he's using here is his leader? That's the isn't that the Victoria miniatures?
That was the Victoria miniatures Adepticon exclusive from earlier this year.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a great.
So, I think that was sculpted by Patrick Keith.
Oh, interesting. So, in my naivete, I thought Victoria did all the sculpting.
No, so Patrick's done quite a few minis for her. A lot of her straight line sculpting.
Interesting. Okay.
I had it. It was in my brain. It was right there. I can't remember it now, and I feel really bad. Sorry. It's by a mutual friend of ours in Tasmania. So
she's got a fantastic line of models. Like it's just grown. It's absolutely it's beautiful. So, Josh, continuing on with you.
So just I was getting that gang updated, so I added like the names on the back of that just because it's easier to track for the campaign and things like that. So that was the Necromunda prep work, and then I jumped into as part of my Tacoma Open event that's kicking off next month. I am doing the Combat Patrol event in addition to Legions Imperialis. And while I have the Marines and Necron Combat Patrols all ready to go, fully painted, the passion for 40k, even though they're overpowered right now, has definitely been Eldar. Like, I want this as a hobby project first and foremost, but having that kind of deadline, and it's just a Combat Patrol event, I definitely have been working towards getting the Eldar Combat Patrol up and running, and I'll just use this as the basis of my Eldar army going forward. And this is also, in a way, because a lot of the Eldar stuff that's very overpowered at the moment, you will not find in this Combat Patrol box. So I'm going to use this as the core for my 1,000-point army, my 1,500-point army, my 2,000-point army. So these models are going to be seen throughout all the different size point build-outs of that. So for me, it's just a good way to jumpstart the hobby of the army with that kind of deadline as inspiration. But also, I think it'll be a fun Combat Patrol event. So looking forward to that.
What's
listen? I think. Sorry. Go.
I was going to say, what craft world are you doing again?
So this is a custom craft world, which was it is mentioned in the lore throughout some of the older codexes. I think first mentioned in 6th edition, but this is the one that Colin Ward largely inspired the paint job from, which is Xianxar, which is going to be kind of a bone and orange color with a little like bone primary, orange secondary, and then black as tertiary, kind of for the colorings of that.
Nice.
And then some really cool. I got as we'll get into. Got some stencils for them, so I 3D printed the bases because I wanted resin bases for this to get a nice craft world view. So that was kind of the next step of this was, okay, everything I need in the Combat Patrol, let's print up some bases. Cool. So I can tie them into their craft world. And then I also ordered some custom decals. So this is the iconography for this craft world does not exist officially. Right. They're named officially, but they don't have an official color scheme or icon. So this is one that Colin actually had made. So I had Fallout Hobbies does a great job with custom decals. Right. So I had them print up a couple sheets of custom decals for me to use throughout the army. So I'm all set on decals now. And then just because I'm leaning into it, I went full yellow and reached out to Chessex and getting some dice ordered up by Chessex. I won't have these for it's a pretty long lead time. I think it's like 8 to 10 weeks to actually get them delivered, but they were able to show me the proofs, same day, and I'll get a fun surprise in the mail with my my nice custom logoed six dice. So I've got my regular dice, and then also I got the off-color dice, the kind of blue, the teal and red ones to use as fate dice.
Right.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's super happy. It's a great start, and it's just it's for 40k. It's what's motivating me right now, even though I am getting Sharkadons in a really good place at the same time. Cool.
So what I'd say too is Combat Patrol's working as intended here, right? I mean, it's great for you have a core set, and then you're playing with that core set, and then you're expanding upon it. And absolutely. I think it's one of the smartest things Games Workshop has done in a long time, which is a box that you immediately can play the game with, as opposed to, well, I buy this, but I also have to buy X, Y, and Z.
And I'm not playing super competitive. So like I was saying earlier, like most of the stuff in the Combat Patrol, you're not going to see in any competitive list, but that's not how I'm engaging with 40k right now. So it's kind of the perfect core. You got a unit of Guardians, you got a Wraith Lord, you got 6 jet bikes, and you got a Farseer. Like you can't go wrong with that. So as I'm ramping up for that,
no joke either. So.
And in Combat Patrol, I think they're going to be really good because the boards are so small. So I think it still will be a good Combat Patrol, but they're going to be fun in all the sizes. So while I'm ramping up for the Eldar, at the same time, I'm getting very close to having my 1,500 point and 2,000 point fully Primaris Sharkadon list going. Okay. So in a push to get them there, I got 5. The last 5 just Primaris intercessors that I needed. These are just going to be the objective holding guys in the back with a grenade launcher and move around, grab an objective, and then cover some backfield stuff like that. And the other thing I'm working on right now, still a work in progress, is the Impulsor, which is the kind of the Primaris Impala, which will be largely a transport either for those intercessors.
The Primaris Impala.
That's what it is.
It's terrible. It's a terrible description.
Just quickly,
you can't see it as much from this angle. Sorry, what's that, Dave?
I was going to say just quickly on the previous photo, are those Mark V and Mark VI helmets you've got on them there?
Yeah, so you'll notice on the right shoulder pads, for the most part, model right, I did the kind of bonding stud Mark V stuff.
Right.
So Sharkadons are the Carcharodons, or the proper name for it, and their lore is that they're fleet based, like they are outer dark, so they are not getting re-equipped frequently at all. So they're really kind of ragtag. So all my, before Primaris was a thing, all my models were Mark III, Mark V, and just kind of a ragtag of armor types, because they're just making do with what they have. So I wanted to carry that forward going into the Primaris stuff. So I've got, the bonding stud shoulder pads, Mark V, Mark VI, for most of my helmets. And you'll just, so the one guy has one of the new modern helmets, and everybody else has the other Mark V, Mark VI or his helmet list there. So it's a very, very easy kit bash, but I do still want to carry that theme forward with this army, and it's been a lot of fun bringing that. So I'll give a lot of guys chain axes and things like that, which don't have any difference in the rules for Space Marines. Chaos cares, but Space Marines don't. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun carrying that theme throughout. Yeah, from the old stuff to the new, and looks very cohesive for everything that I have together. Yeah,
no, I think it looks great, particularly the where you're painting that bone on the helmet. It's a different shape for those, and so obviously the Mark VI is much larger. It's broader there for the Mark V. So yeah, no, I think it's a great idea.
It looks fantastic. Yeah, and it's in the I can't remember which Imperial armor it was that had the Necrons and the Minotaurs fighting it out. Fall of Orpheus, yeah, the Sharkadons or Carcharodons feature heavily. Now you got me saying Sharkadons all the time. Feature heavily there, and Alan Bly did a really great job of like writing them as like even their ships, kind of take on this shark like they're looming in the deep, and then they come out. There's a shark theme carried through the whole thing that works really, really well.
Their dreadnoughts are submerged underwater while they're dormant. It's kind of very, very shark themed. And then while I was at it painting those intercessors, I got the grays done on my Assault intercessors with jump packs. So just while I had the airbrush out there, I was like, might as well get these going. So I've got my 10 Assault intercessors with jump packs. Again, you'll see the bonding stud shoulder pads, some Mark V, some Mark VI helmets mixed in, just again carrying that theme throughout stuff. And then I also added the captain with jump pack in there as well, and these will be part of the future expansion. So as soon as I finish the Impulsor, I'll have 1,500 points painted, a 1,500 point list ready to go, and after that, from 1,500 points to 2,000 points, it's only 2 models I need to paint in order to get that army up to 2,000, and rebasing a couple Terminators, which I already did the bases while I was working on those intercessor bases. So yeah, Sharks are in a great spot, and as soon as I'm wrapping them up, I'll be very quickly ramping up for the Eldar Combat Patrol with Tacoma about a month and a half away. So got a little bit of time. It's not a ton of models. Yeah,
I can't wait to start battling it out with you on this, because I've been playing a lot of 40K lately and I'm really enjoying it. So.
And that, honestly, that's been a big motivation for me, because we are, I don't know, like Eldar are more exciting for me for the hobby side of things, but because I think the Sharks are going to play so well against your Black Legion, like I think those are going to be really fun games. That's actually been a huge motivation for me to just get that army across the finish line.
I agree. So we did, as we'll talk in a little bit, begin your Necromunda campaign. Yeah. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. We got in some games. My games went so well that I had earned enough points and money to come back and buy a this guy here at the Ambot. Yeah. So after our second day, I raced home and immediately started painting him up because I was like, I'm gonna get this guy in my next games. Added a bit of rust to him. I did some stippling on the hazard striping that I did to make it look a little worn. It's kind of the first time I've experimented with some of these things. And overall, I thought he came out really, really well. I used a lot of Army Painter airbrushes for this. Contrast paints for this that I ran through my airbrushes filters.
Oh, nice.
And so, it came out. I'm super happy with the way he came out. He looks dirty and messy and like an Ambot should. So super excited about that.
Yeah, looks great. I love the weathering that you have on the base there too.
Yeah, I kind of feel like I could have gone further, but I kind of chickened out. I'm such a chicken when it comes to weathering. So, I'm getting there though. This guy, I did add quite a bit of rust to the bottom and to like his hands and chain blades and stuff. So
it is possible to go too far. So
I'm aware.
Yeah. So no, that's good.
Blood in particular, using blood, I find like I like the amount that Josh added to his Necromunda guys, but I feel like blood can sometimes you can go really too far with it. Even for World Eaters, there's times where I'm just like, okay, and then So anyway, did this. In the back, you can see some of the other work that I was doing for my wife. Because when your wife says, hey, I want to play 40K with you, you say, okay, what do I need to do to make that happen? And what I need to do to make that happen is help her paint this. And I think earlier I had said she wants Night Lords and she has them. She wanted them purple instead of blue because purple's her thing. And so, okay, here we go. And I've talked about this on the show. Caleb came out and gave us some tutorials on that, and I've been following that and moving forward. And originally I said, well, Shell's going to have to paint this army because I'm painting all this, but when your wife really wants to play and you're not working, you start helping her paint. So first thing I did was knock out a Demon Prince for her, which I just got the interest in painting it, and I tried a couple different things on this guy. I have to say, I didn't really get the hate for this model in terms of his pose and all that from people when it came out. Like I thought it's fine. But having done my older version Demon Prince and now done this guy, I think he's a decent model, but there are aspects to him that I'm not super fan of. His hunched over look, his pose is kind of off. Now the new one, like I finished this guy and I was literally like, I should maybe go buy the new one and do the new one, but he's done. He'll work for her army for the time being. But I do like the kind of molten stuff I did on the shoulder pad here, where it has kind of a glowing effect coming through the chaos symbols.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is if you look closely at the sword and where he's holding it, you can see the eye, and it kind of has an Eye of Sauron thing going on there. Right. And that's going to be a running theme throughout her whole army, that these eyes are kind of coming out. So finish that guy up, and she was really happy with him. Then I moved on to the rest of her army, which I had already based purple. I'd already done all the electricity, the lightning on, right. And then began the long slog of gold trim.
The long war.
Yeah, the long war.
The long war of trim.
Yeah, and so I just sat down. I made her do a bunch of the preliminary blacking of those areas, and then I went through and did most of the gold on it. She did a little bit, but we knocked out every unit that she had, every infantry type unit. We did all that gold on. So that was good. And then since that sat there, I said, okay, well, let me start painting these up. And so this is the Terminator Sorcerer we built using the pink horror arm holding the book over his back. And we finished this guy up. Again, I'm terrible at taking pictures. Josh, I need your instructions there. So this guy looks a little bit better. You can see on the back here, the electricity on the back, as well as the book being held. I was very proud of the work I did on his book. In particular, the back, the binding of the book, and the eyes that are coming through the book. And again, you see that same kind of theme those types of eyes, the kind of Iasaron looking type eyes.
Yeah.
All throughout the book. I was very, very happy with the way this model came out. And as I look at it, on the table, it looks fantastic. So the scripting on the book and everything, like I made the pages look worn, and I did the scripting, and somebody was talking about, wow, how did you do it? And it's a micron pen with I think this one is a brown micron pen. And so it works great for any type of writing you're trying to do on something. It's not cheating. It's getting the effect that you want. So
yeah.
So that was that.
I love
the
that
sorcerer.
The book looks like the pages are made of flesh, which is very fitting for Night Lords.
Right.
And then the script almost looks like it's written in blood. You got like a little mini pentagram on there, and the eyes look great, especially the blue back with that kind of orange on the the eyes. Just like that color contrast makes them really pop out, and that looks great.
It works really well. It's funny. I tried to do a Zeech symbol on the left page there, but every time I look at it now, it looks like a duck to me. So, but it is what it is. It's done.
It's the quacker
done.
of the waves.
That's right. That's right. But I'm very happy with this model. He came out great. So then I moved on to the 5-man Terminator squad and worked that whole thing. Again, a lot of this is using the Army Painter, paints through
the speed paint.
Yeah, the speed paints through filters, and the gold I use, I think the AK
the scale
Necro
color.
Gold. Yeah, scale color Necro Gold. It's so good.
Yep,
it's so good for covering like in one go.
Yeah.
So
it's definitely one of my
super
favorites.
happy with the way these came out, and you can't really tell in this picture because I'm a terrible photographer again, but the eyes on all the models have come out fantastic. I got a tutorial on how to do eyes from Caleb, and they look great. So
the lighting effect looks fantastic across them too.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I'll get to it in a minute, but then I've knocked out an initial 5 Legionnaires, and then I started working on Obliterators, but got a little frustrated with the way the skin was going. I'm going to revisit that. And so I switched over to doing another 5 Legionnaires, and I've knocked out this 5-man squad of Legionnaires too. Again, you can see at the center, the aspiring champion here we use in the center. He has that eye in the center of his chest. And anybody who has a gun, there's some of these guns that have like eyes. The bolters have like eyes kind of coming out the sides of them. All of those are painted in this same motif. And this guy's axe as well has it kind of bursting out of the middle of the axe. So
nice.
I like that it kind of draws it all together. Looks really good. And this
it's the rug that ties the room together.
Yeah. And I couldn't be happier with the way the army's coming out, and Shell's thrilled with it. So
yeah, it's looking
there
great.
You go. Yeah. And then because I saw an article about how great Vindicators were, and I had a Vindicator that was already kind of painted up black and just had the grays on it, I finished this off, painting some, doing the headlights, doing edging, blah, 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 adding some decals. So now I've got a Chaos Black Legion Vindicator for my army whenever I choose to use that. Its weapon profile is insane, by the way.
Is it? Yeah.
Crazy good strength. Yeah. Crazy good blast. And then, so that was that. And then I moved on, and we received our Land Raider for Shell's army. I got it in at the local Games Workshop store, which, I'm a little like, Games Workshop customer service used to be so good, and I'm running into a few issues with them regularly now, but it sat there, the order sat there for over a week in just processing, and I emailed them and I said, hey, what's going on? And I didn't receive a response after a couple of days, so I emailed them again, still didn't receive a response. Then all of a sudden I just saw that it had changed to whatever, not the processing, but not delivered, but whatever term they use, and it wasn't very descriptive. And so finally I called the Games Workshop and I go, hey, do you have a Land Raider sitting there for me? And they're like, yeah, it's been here for a couple days. I'm like, and then after I had the Land Raider and had it assembled, I get an email back from Games Workshop that says, oh, by the way, we've seen that it's been delivered. I'm like, yeah, got that figured out myself. So I assembled the Land Raider, and then Shell chaosified it, adding various sprue components to it. She's super excited about this. We also got 2 Forge Fiends delivered, and Shell assembled all those on her own.
Nice.
And so I have now not only primed them, but I've also given them their first coats of purples, so they are ready for detail work. And I have this, they're gonna have lightning all over them in that same motif that I've done on the miniature, so they're just gonna look fantastic when they're
nice. So looking at the Land Raider here, it looks like your front doors, you left the option for those to open. Are you going to be painting the inside of it?
No, no. And I highly suspect that these will just eventually be glued shut. But yes, they are available to be.
What you can do, Carl, is open them up and just splatter blood everywhere inside it.
Yes.
Yeah.
If anybody opens it.
You can't overdo blood. We already discussed that. So yeah, I think the army is kind of coming together. We are very much getting to a point where she's about to be able to play, and so Shell's, she's nervous getting into it, and she doesn't want her thing is she doesn't want to hold other people up all the time. And we, as much as all of her friends tell her that's silly, don't worry about it, we'll help you, we'll walk you through it. She still is very conscious of that. It's a complicated game. Not that she's not very intelligent, but it's a lot to take in for a new player. And so, we're going to probably play some team games together, with my Black Legion and her Night Lords, as well as games against each other, so she can just get a feel for it. Yeah. And I think she'll absolutely love it. And the Chaos Codex is in such a great place right now. It's so good, and it's just like there's so many ways to play it, and just thematically, I think it's probably the strongest Chaos Codex since the 3.5 one, and not in terms of physical strength on the table, although I don't think it's hurting too bad there. I just mean in terms of just the variety and the thematic elements and what you can do with it is just fantastic. Yeah. Fantastic from a narrative standpoint. Yeah.
That's so good.
Couldn't be more excited with what I got. Yeah. So yeah, that was me in terms of hobby progress. Now, did we want to move on to games played, Josh?
Yeah.
Should we just knock it all out right now? All right. Well, here we go then. So
buckle up.
Games played, Josh. We've done a lot recently. Dave, thank God you said, "Oh, I'm sorry I didn't play any games lately," and we're like, you know what? Thank you.
Perfect. Otherwise, this would have been a 4-hour episode.
Yeah, we will try to speed through this. I'm just going to hit the tops of the waves of my games. But Josh, take it away. What did you do first?
Yeah, so we kicked off the Necromunda Outlands campaign. This is a campaign that I'm running. We kicked it off with summer, just in time for a lot of our teacher friends. We have about 3 teacher friends in our close group here that are all super busy during the school year, but love to play games. Like Brian, Matt, and Jody, 3 of the guys that I play more games with than anybody, but they're all teachers. So teacher summer is a good time to celebrate some mini games and kicking this off. So we launched the campaign. We had 8 people showed up for campaign day.
Yeah.
Of the I think 11 or 12 we have in the campaign total.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is at Sky's new store.
Yeah. So this is at the new location of Herrick Games, and you see tons of game space, lots of play space. He had a bunch of product on other tables, which is why we spread it out a little bit. We could have been more consolidated, but it's always good to have some room there. So we've got Zone Mortalis tables, we've got kind of Sector Mechanicus tables, got my 3D printed junk board, and it was really fun to kick this off. And we'll go into more of the details about the campaign and Necromunda campaign in general in our upcoming Patreon episode. So I won't go into a ton of depth about the campaign or the games, but we'll keep it high level here right now. So my first game was against Cliff, and Cliff was playing Ash Waste Nomads, and this was his first game of Necromunda, period.
Oh, wow.
Which on one hand is an unfair pairing for me to play against him, but I was also very much like teaching him the game. He'd read the rules, and so I was walking him through them and talking, pointing out tactical things, and do you want to do this here, do you want to do this there, and just very much walking him through this first game. And by the second game, I think he was in a great place. So the highlight for me for this game was we were fighting over this gunk tank in the middle, which we used a pretty small gunk tank. We're trying to collect tokens, and tokens get you resources that help you build out your settlement, but also get you paid. So I threw this smoke grenade, as you can see on the bottom left there, which blocked off shooting from that. There's kind of this 4-way corridor. So I was coming down the middle, the bottom middle. The left was blocked out by the smoke grenade, which refused to go away. It lasted 3 turns. The smoke grenade just refused to go away. So his flanking guys couldn't get any shots on me. And my gang's a little bit more melee oriented. And then I threw this wall of fire in the dead center version, which he had a couple guys in there. None of them caught on fire, really got wounded, but it ended up creating this choke point where he didn't want to go in there because he'd have to walk through a wall of fire, which in fire in Necromunda, you catch on fire and you run around like an idiot and run into walls and fall down. And it's really fun, but it's ridiculous. So I had two of the 3 entry points that he had potential access to, kind of blocked off by these templates. And most of my gang was just walking up the middle. It's like, if this doesn't work, I'm going to just get shot because the Nomads are a very shooty based gang. And then he had a couple guys on the right flank from where I was, and he was able to take out a few of my gangers. But he was mostly, I was able to force his movement a bit, which made I actually ended up having a pretty good payday for collecting some gunk tokens. His gang ended up bottling out, so he ran away and stayed safe. One guy did have a permanent death, he just unlucky on the roll. He didn't have any credits, so it was a critical injury. He didn't have credits in order to pay for the rogue doc. So one guy did end up dying, which was unfortunate for the first game of the campaign. But a super fun game. Cliff's a great guy, and really excited that he was excited for his first game of Necromunda. He's definitely into it. So,
Cool.
And just for those who aren't familiar with Necromunda, bottling out means your gang just kind of loses its morale and flees the battlefield at that point.
Yeah.
So
you get to a point that you're testing against the number of bodies or number of gangers on your side that are either seriously injured or taken out of action. And you're comparing that to your starting number of gangers, and you're adding a D6 roll to that. And if you exceed that, your gang bottles out, and there's a chance your guys will start running away if they don't pass their cool checks.
Right.
So super fun game. Great game of Necromunda. It was really good walking Cliff through that. He's so excited, and I was really into it. So it was a great game.
Oh, sorry. Thought I was moving the right thing. Okay, Necromunda game 2.
Game 2 was against Aaron. So my game 1 went very well. Game 2, we were playing a mining mission. So there was 4 different sites on the board that you wanted to spend a turn to mine. And mining was a double action. So you had to get in position and stay in position long enough that you could spend your entire activation for the models to actually do this kind of like excavation mining action. The thing with Necromunda, if you get shot, you fall down. So you need to stand up, and then you don't have action points.
And that takes an action.
That takes one of your action points, but mining is a double action. So you need a full complete action in order to do this. So if you get shot, you're not able to get tokens. Aaron had a guy, I wish I got a picture of it, but he had a Juve. He was playing Orlox. Again, I'm playing the Outcast Hive Scum. He brought a Juve, it's a wrecker, so Orlock wrecker. So it's a guy with a jump pack and a hand flamer. So he's very fast and has this hand flamer, and he's able to hit 3 of my guys with 1 flame template, which I thought was going to be bad news. Thankfully, the dice were not on his side, so only 1 guy caught on fire. And he was immediately able to put himself out after activating. He ran randomly and then stopped, drop, and rolled and was able to put his fire out. And the other 2 guys didn't take damage. So this, I thought this flame template was going to be the end of my game. I didn't get pictures of it.
It was a good gamble. It was a good gamble on his part, though. I mean, that's a pretty. Yeah. It should have worked.
it should have been more effective, which of course made that guy target priority number 1, and he immediately was taken out of action. Highlight of the game, Aaron was prospecting, and there's a chance, so it's it's 2d6 roll, and if you roll snake eyes, you fall in a pit. And one of his guys did that. He prospected, he fell in a pit, And then on the injury roll, he got a critical injury. So this guy falls in a pit and actually dies because Aaron did not have the credits to pay for the rogue duck. So it's like super bad luck on Aaron's side. I again was able to, he had a couple guys coming up, and I was able to place my firewall again, which is the psychic power that my leader has. My gang is mostly terrible, but my leader's pretty cool. She has this wall of fire that's not overly offensive. It's more of a kind of a defensive deterrent. But Aaron's leader did catch on fire, and he kept running into the wall behind him, which so he would stand up. When you're on fire, you roll 2d6 and a scatter dice to see which way you go. You just kind of randomly run in a direction.
Because you're panicking.
He just kept running into the wall behind him under the template. So he kept just like re-catching on fire, running into the wall, staying on fire. And then Aaron ended up bottling out because he had guys on fire and seriously injured. And so I was able to collect a couple mining sites. Aaron unfortunately didn't get any sites because I was either shooting his guys to knock him down, so they weren't able to prospect, or they were falling into pits and killing themselves, which wasn't great either. So Aaron actually had two guys that died this game. I killed one with a champion. One of my champions has done very well and got 13 experience points in 2 games, which is a big deal. So he's doing very well for himself and bought himself a stat increase. I also
to be clear, like in a game of Necromunda, just because your guy on the table is taken out of action doesn't mean he's dead. Yeah. Like you then have to roll on another table to see if he dies. And this is incredibly bad luck on Aaron's part for him to lose 2 guys.
2 guys actually suffering permanent death in a game is a big deal.
Quick question for you, Josh. Yeah. How many credits do you need to go and see the rogue duck?
It's 2d6 times 10, so it's either 20 credits or up to 120 credits.
Okay,
and you have no idea what it's going to be until you do the action.
Right. So I'm just wondering, the next time I play Necromunda, should I put aside like 80 credits? Just have 80 credits.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, average of dice, it's going to cost you 70 credits. So gangers, you get to keep their weapons if they die, but you don't get to keep their armor or stats or experience, obviously. So some guys aren't always worth saving. You're like, I don't know, he wasn't wearing armor. Somebody new, I can recruit somebody new to take his place for less credits than it would cost to heal this guy. So there's a little kind of risk reward weighing there.
Sure.
But my 2 games went very well, and I was able to also add an ambot to my gang. I already have 2 painted, so I didn't have to paint one. But game 3 of this will hopefully feature my ambot. Which I'm very
Dave, you're making me think I shouldn't have spent all my money on an ambot, and I might have wanted to save some money. This may go horribly.
Be fine. It was certainly not a pattern that I was noticing that people were dying. So,
yeah. Okay, our refresher game, Josh.
Yeah. So before kicking off the campaign, you and I had talked, and it had been maybe a year or 2 even since you had played a game of Necromunda. 2 years. Yeah. And I had played a game last year against Campbell when I went up to Bend and played a game with Campbell at his house. But you and I got together and played a game, and this was just kind of refresh his little custom scenario threw together where we're grabbing loot crates and trying to bring them back to our edge of the board. And this was mostly just to reacquaint you and also myself because I was going to be the first game of the campaign. I probably answered 25, 30 questions that people just had about how Necromunda stuff works. And the second game I probably answered 4. So like that refresh game for Necromunda makes a big deal because there is so much more going on with how interactions work, with the order of operations, things like that. So you and I played a super fun game there. Your Goliath coming out, lots of smoke grenades. The highlight of this game on my side was definitely that one fight started with charging through the smoke grenade here. This is my champion who ended up getting all the experience in the campaign. But he charged this guy, failed to kill him. And then this ended up just being the biggest pillow fight. I think we had 6 fighters in total in this one fight. Yeah. Nobody was doing some wounds and flesh wounds here, but nobody was dying. No one was taking out of action.
Right.
It was just this ineffective pillow fight with 6 gangers and a crocodile, Duchess,
my sub croc. Yeah, that was kind of the highlight. Now here, here's the other thing I would add. Like, this game went so badly for me in terms of dice rolls.
Yeah.
I just, things that should have worked did not work, to the point where I left the game that day and I told Josh, I think I'm going to quit dice games. Like, this is just awful. And so, the reason we did this in this order and talked about this game before the campaign is so that we could both kind of talk about this. Like, I had while playing Josh is always fun. Like, I had a miserable experience getting my guys to do anything I needed them to do.
Yeah,
it just happens. I tend to be a very bad dice roller. I mean, and that's easy to say and say, oh, dice went poorly, but listen, I went on Play on Tabletop, and you can just go witness my dice rolls on Play on Tabletop. Like,
I tell people
I'm
camera.
bad. There's evidence on film, and when JD the announcer's like, I don't even know what to say. I'm like, yep, that's par for the course. So I left here going, man, I really suck at dice games. Then I played my Necromunda game, and actually I played a game of 40K before this, but I'll talk about my Necromunda games because I rocked up to the table and I played this guy, Jody. And Jody. And I tell Jody right up front, I'm like, man, I'm just awful at this. So I told him about wanting to quit dice games because I played Josh, and this is what happened. And this is the gunk reservoir that Josh was alluding to earlier, mission where you have to run up and draw gunk from this thing and then take it off the table. And so Jody and I start playing, and I maneuver my Goliath gang into position, who are not really great shooters. They tend to be better in close combat, but I do have some shooting capability. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to get up to the gunk tank, but my guys are a lot slower than Jody's. And Jody has these jump pack guys that the same guys,
the wreckers. Yeah.
And so he's able to jump up to the gunk tank real fast. So I decide, well, I'm going to shoot at the guy trying to pump gunk from the gunk tank. Well, as it turns out, when you miss somebody in Necromunda and there's something nearby them, there's a chance you'll hit the nearby thing. And so I shoot at his guy. I hit the gunk tank instead of Jody's guy pumping the gunk, and it blinds Jody's guy, which in Necromunda being blinded means basically you have no actions the next round. I decide this is excellent. and it actually turns the pace of the battle to the point where I'm up there pumping gunk and loading it onto my sump croc, because I'm gonna have my sump croc run off with the gunk with my guy, and I'm thinking this will be great. But Jody ends up bottling out as I'm just wrecking him, and my dice are like on fire. And Jody's like, "Oh, sure. So you're terrible at dice games. You can quit dice games." I'm like, "Not after this. This is amazing."
Back in the game.
I'm back. So things went very well for my gang this game, and I was able to loot just because he bottled out. I was able to get additional gunk, which turns into credits. So I'm feeling pretty good after my first game, and I'm like, all right, game went great. I'm going to now play Cliff. Now this is Cliff, and Cliff is running. He played his first game against Josh. And so I said, well, I'll play Cliff. I'm not nearly as experienced as Josh in Necromunda. So let's get our game in. And his gang is really good at shooting.
Yeah.
Like really good at shooting. And his gang leader is no slouch in close combat either. As Josh mentioned, you're trying to mine these various sections. The way the game kind of worked out, like I was able to mine mine. He would, how many times did I say mine? I was able to mine the sections that I needed to mine. He was able to mine the sections he needed to mine. I had lost one guy in close combat to him. I think his name, can't remember my guy's name. It's like the Spine something.
Oh,
he ends up getting like... Yeah, and he ends up getting spinal damage. So it was appropriately named. So that reduces his strength permanently by 1, which is a big deal for Goliath guys.
Yeah.
But that's okay. I'll work it out. But again, I like to throw around lots of smoke grenades to cover me as I get closer. We did make a mistake in that when you charge into close combat and you can't see the opponent, you take a -1 to your hits on that charge, and he charged into smoke where I was to fight my guy, and we didn't apply that, but that's okay. It was all around, like, it was super fun game. I got some mad respect for the ash waste. What are they called? The nomads.
The nomads.
Ash waste nomads.
That chain lance the leader has is brutal.
Yeah, it was. And if you let these guys, get lines of fire on you, they will do some damage. So his army was his gang was fantastically painted. We had such a great time. And I was glad to see Cliff get like a little bit of forward momentum with his gang.
Yeah.
Because
I think
he had gotten
10 credits after our first game. So he needed to pay.
Yeah, he'd gotten so brutalized by Josh, because Josh is that kind of guy that fortunately he had a great game against me. So that wrapped up our thing. I told you I earned enough credits off of all this to basically equip more guys with smoke grenades, as well as go get an ambot. So I'm beginning to regret that and think maybe I should have saved 80 credits as Dave just said.
It's absolutely fine. I think it's one of my favorite things about campaigns, and Necromunda campaigns in particular, is when you play that game and you play another game straight after, and you're super excited, and you go, "Oh, I'm going to start ramping this up," and the escalation, the arms race is incredible, and that you went home and you bought it, you took it home, you assembled it, painted it up straight away. Just speaks to how much how excited you're about that.
Yeah. It also speaks to how quickly that model's going to die on the table.
Yeah. Oh no, they're pretty durable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, then I went, as I've been doing, I went down to the guild house and joined the guys from Faultline Gaming, Faultline 40K, to play a game against this guy, Bryce.
Oh yeah.
Who you have seen him post his Tyranids on our Facebook group over and over again. And let me tell you, the pictures don't do them justice, because in person, he is clearly in love with painting this army, and it is just gorgeous and a lot of fun to see on the table. So again, now remember, this is actually before my Necromunda game against Jody. So I'm coming into this straight off of the day before getting stomped by Josh because I just can't roll very well. And I say, I have the game. I'm thinking of quitting dice games. I think that's my new mantra, because my dice are on fire this game. Just on fire. We set up the game. My secondary objective is get into his deployment zone and get on his objective to get the secondary objective. So I decide, well, he's setting up his Tyranids. I put my Land Raider right out front, and I'm like, I'm just going to charge in there with my Land Raider and my Terminators. I'm going to get to his objective. Then he plops down 6 Zoanthropes. For those who don't know, Zoanthropes are very good anti-vehicle.
Yep.
Basically las cannon shooting mind blasters. And I said, oh no, I think I've made a terrible mistake.
I've made a terrible error.
Yeah, I did lose the initiative the first round. So he goes first, blasts the heck out of my Land Raider. My Land Raider survives with like 2 wounds.
Oh,
so he says, okay, I'm going to charge it with these gaunts, hoping to just scrape off 2 wounds off of it. That does not happen. The Land Raider then begins to proceed to run over the gaunts over and over again, because it's actually not too bad in close combat. So he's backing up and driving forward over the gaunts. And the Terminators are kind of stuck in it for the moment. But my first round, I spend my command point. I heal my Land Raider up 3 points. But I concentrate immediately on those Zoanthropes with my here you can see the gaunts attacking the Land Raider.
Nice.
But I concentrate on the Zoanthropes over there with my Havocs that are up like in just a perfect position to have kind of dominance of the board. I mean, any lane that opens up, like, they can just lay down so much fire. So I take out almost all of those Zoanthropes with that. I'm involved in combat left and right. He charges after 1 round of firing. He charges into my Forge Fiend, kind of preventing it and tying it up, preventing it from really doing much more shooting as it's hooked in. But he charges it with the Von Royen's Lictors, I think that Leapers,
Yep.
Lictors. Yeah, and these things have fight first. So, you know, counterattacking them with my Demon Prince really makes me a little hesitant to jump in there with them. I just decide, you know what? I'm just going to let them scrape the paint off this Forge Fiend for a long time. Meanwhile, my Demon Prince leaps forward, starts slaughtering things. And it was funny because, you know, Bryce is trying to be helpful, and I'm like, oh, I think I've made this terrible mistake putting the Land Raider here. And Bryce goes, yeah, you really need a screening unit. Now, I had forgotten to bring with me my Beastmen.
Oh no.
And yeah, and they were actually part of my list. So Bryce had removed one cheap unit from his thing, so we were kind of in parity there. But he's like, you really need a screening unit. And I go, I think I'm okay. I go, you mean like Beastmen? and I go, but I go, I think I'm okay. Round 2 rolls around, and between all the firing I have and the combat capability of the Demon Prince and such, I am able to pretty much wreck everything off the table Bryce has.
Wow.
So by round 3, I've destroyed his Screamer Killer. I've destroyed all of the Zoanthropes. I've destroyed, you know, a bunch of stuff. I've gotten my Terminators into close combat with his Hive Tyrant. Things are going very well for the Black Legion. We end up calling it in round 3, and that was that. He did have a really cool power, the Shadows of the Warp, and he has this one power that allows him to force leadership tests across the board. Every unit on the board has to make a leadership test, and this was actually integral at one point, as it caused a unit that was holding in a it caused a unit that was holding an objective to no longer be able to hold the objective because they got battle shocked. And I thought that was pretty cool use of it. So it's once per game, thank God.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Black Legion delivered, and it was a massive success for the Force. So I left there going, maybe I won't quit, you know, dice games.
Recharge.
This then led into playing against Jody, and I said, I think my dice are on a roll all of a sudden. Like maybe I should run up back to play on tabletop. But anyway, so we play that weekend of Necromunda games. Then the next week, I head back down to the guild house again, and I play John, and John is the new president of the Faultline 40K group there. The old president has stepped down after 4.5 years. It's supposed to be a 2-year gig, but because of COVID and everything, and he's done just such a fabulous job that they've now broken up his job into 4 other people.
Oh wow!
So, but John is the new president, and then Bryce is involved, and several other guys are involved in helping run the club and the events. It's been a lot of fun playing with these guys. John, the reason I played John is because John has Leagues of Votann.
Yeah, he does.
And I said, hey, does anybody have Leagues of Votann? I'd really like to play against them, just see how they play out. And so John brings a really great kind of diverse army there. I bring my standard 1,500 point Black Legion list, and we set up to play. Now, we'll talk about it later in the episode, but Leagues of Votann also gain additional combat points if they're able to wipe out units in the first turn or this kind of thing. So he concentrates right away on my Beastmen, who are within range of his bikes, and he pretty much wipes them off the table. Of course he did. It's the first time they've hit the table since they've been painted. So they're wiped out to a man. He gets 3 additional combat points. Okay, not a problem. The other thing that Leagues of Votann get are they're not called grudges, but they're called
judgment tokens.
Dave? Judgment tokens, which the
I'll
second
say it
one
here.
you get.
I really think GW missed a trick. They should have called them grudgement tokens.
Oh yes,
just your wonderful intersection of judgment and grudges. Grudgement.
Yep.
Yeah. The second you can stack up to 2 of these on a unit, and you get some right at the beginning of the game. And so he stacks them on a couple things. He stacks them on my Land Raider. He puts 2 of them on the Land Raider, meaning he is going to do additional. It makes them easier to hit, and easier to wound at that point, which is smart. It's very smart. But I tell him, I go, this Forge Fiend over here is a really tough unit. I go, you might want to think about that one. He's like, I'm good. Okay. So as the game progresses, he wipes out the Beastman right away. I roll my Land Raider up to the middle of the table. I'm hoping to go a little further with it, but I end up not really moving it beyond where it sits because it has pretty good range with its las cannons at various things. He's shot at it. It's as Land Raiders do in this edition, man. Like my Land Raider has not been destroyed in a game up to this point, and he is shooting everything at it, trying to take it out, and it just keeps on trucking and firing back. My Havoc team is shooting things that it needs to shoot, and then my Forge Fiend gets into position, and he learns that Forge Fiends are really nasty, and so Forge Fiend starts wiping stuff out. I'm moving up, controlling the objectives I need to control before they disappear. The Terminators get out, assault things that they need to assault. But the great thing about the game is I'm learning a lot about how Votann works. Like some units that drop down have, if you shoot at them, they can immediately shoot back at you. This kind of thing where I don't want to draw kind of the fire that I may potentially draw. He drops down his heavy units that can destroy vehicles. They like deep strike in. They end up taking my Land Raider down to 1 point left on it. But it's still sitting there shooting. He is finally able to destroy the Land Raider. And this is the first time I've had the Land Raider destroyed in the game, but I was like, it did its job. Yep. Like it sat in the center of the table, drawing fire, shooting back, killing units, doing what it needed to do. The Terminators go in, mop up some units here. The Obliterators drop down, destroy a unit, but then get charged by the Chthonian Berserks. And man, man, Chthonian Berserks with these hammers do tons of damage, and they just wipe out my Obliterators so easily. Wow. It wasn't even funny. Wow. And because my Obliterators had destroyed a unit, they now had a judgment token against them, and so it made it even easier for him to just take those guys out. But in the end, I think we call the game around turn 4. The Black Legion has gotten so far ahead at this point that there's no real hope for the Votann guys. And one of the problems that John had, and we talked about it afterwards, and he realized it, was he had things in reserve. He had things that went back into reserve, but then he brought them out piecemeal over 2 turns. So I was just able to pick them off as they came out. And he said, I think I should have brought everything out at once. I was like, I wouldn't have known quite what to do if you'd had everything on the table at one time. So overall, though, John was a fantastic opponent. It was a fantastic game. We had a great time, and it was great to see that army in action. Like I'd never played against them. They do play very different than kind of a lot of other things, and they're really good in that mid-range. Like they have a lot of healthy hitting in the mid to short range area, but they do struggle a little bit in the short range. But the models are fantastic, and John was just a fantastically fun opponent. Nice. And Bryce is always a good opponent. I've had just great games down there. But man, my enjoyment of 10th edition 40K continues to just ramp up. And you said I should do a palette cleanser and paint up my Legion Imperial stuff, and I'm just like, I'm having way too much fun with 40K at the moment.
That's okay too.
Like just
follow the passions.
So anyway, that was my games played. It was absolutely a great time. So let's do this. We're going to take a short break. We'll come back, and now we'll start talking about Leagues of Votann. We'll get into the whole story about them and whatnot, and Dave will share some stuff. And then towards the very end of that presentation, we'll also go through kind of a showcase of Dave's Leagues of Votann, and we can talk a little bit more about the various units there. So we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. And we're now going to leap into our main topic, which is show force the Leagues of Votann. And so I think the best place to start is really the story really starts with the squats.
Right. Yeah.
and what the squats were. And Dave, since you've been around a long time, in the
that's
hobby,
the loveliest way of saying it. He Dave.
Venerable.
Because
I think I'm older than you are.
You might be.
So
you might be. We'll see.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about what the squats were. They Rogue Trader mentioned Space Dwarves when Rogue Trader came out, and then the army list was published in White Dwarf in the 1989 compendium. But what really were the Space Dwarves or the squats as they became known?
Well, basically because GW was selling, like Warhammer was doing really well for GW in the late 80s. And they had a lot of fantasy stuff. Fantasy was selling very well. A couple of folks like Rick Priestley wanted to do something in the sci-fi sort of realm. And I think the easiest way to sell that to Brian Ansell was, we'll just do like Warhammer in space. So space dwarves, space elves, space orcs. Strangely enough, humans were just called humans, not space humans. But so Space Wars was a way to do that.
Space races.
Space races. So Space Wars were a way to bring the dwarves in. That stubborn, tough, burly kind of dwarven archetype, and bring them into 40K, the newly developed now incredibly successful. I think right from the get-go, from like 87, Rogue Trader was doing great. It was all they could do to try and get things rolling and bring everything in. So I think those initial points, they had an idea, and that idea was like biker miners. So that was the aesthetic that they leaned into really hard for that. A lot of vests, goggles, biker kind of attire. And when I think it's probably 89 as well, probably 88, 89, and they were doing plastic sets. So they did obviously the RTB01 Space Marines earlier. Then they did the Space Orcs plastic box set, and then they did the Space Dwarves plastic box set, which they went with those padded jackets and like quilted jackets kind of look and that kind of thing.
I didn't realize. I guess I never realized they were in plastic.
Yeah. There was
I thought they were all metal.
There's a box out there, Space Dwarves box, 36 plastic dwarves with plastic like sprues for weapons and arms that could then also sit on those metal dwarves. There are metal variants through there as well.
Gotta love those hybrid kits.
Yeah.
The worst. I'd just give me all metal if you're going to go there.
Yeah. But so they were pretty substantial. I couldn't tell you how well they were selling back then, but
well, clearly not well enough because because I mean after the second edition Black Books, which had their codex list, and they were in Epic, and they had a full range in Epic.
They had a huge range in Epic,
but then
which is where I saw them on the table most.
But then they vanish. Like they vanish, and then like a story comes out that they've just been eaten by the Tyranids.
Yeah,
so
something that I didn't know. I went and looked it up to find out sort of when that started happening. But apparently there was a somebody asked the question, like sent in a letter to the U.S. office, and it went into the U.S. White Dwarf, and it was like, well, what happened to the squats? Where are they? Why aren't you guys doing anything with them? And apparently the person responded with, would you believe they were eaten by Tyranids?
And thus lore is established. You got to be careful responding to letters, buddy.
And that is canon.
Well, as they went through the whole, I guess a bunch of people must have saying, God. "Oh, well, they were eaten by Tyranids. They were eaten by Tyranids. Eaten by Tyranids." At some point, there was an interview with Jervis Johnson, and he said, "Well, they were eaten by Tyranids." And it's like, okay, so you just adapted and adopted it. And that's it.
Yeah. This is why companies are so careful with what they say a lot of times, right? I mean, things can quickly get out of your control. And the thing was, they were very popular. I mean, I remember early on, in the show, when we had Zach as a co-host, he was painting a squad army before we went to our first Adepticon, and man, it looked like he did a stunning job on it. He had built like an airship that they were using and all this stuff out of scratch, and like he did it. Zach was a very talented painter back in the day, and so yeah, I mean that kind of became the mantra. And I actually remember talking to some of the game developers, the 40K game developers in this time period. And I said, so, well, what's going on with, the squats? Like, are you seriously just never going to do them again? And they're like, well, the biggest issue we have is how are they different? Like, how do they play differently than an Imperial Guard army or than a Space Marine army? And so once we can kind of establish how would they play different, if we have that idea and it's exciting, like, then we'll pursue it. And that's a very interesting theme kind of across all of the ranges. And it led me actually to, I remember when they called the Deepkin, the Idoneth Deepkin came out. And I remember at Adepticon, they announced, here's this army that's coming out. And I asked, everybody's always asking in those presentations, well, what about this? And questions they just aren't going to really answer. But I asked, how does this army play? Like what is thematically, how does this army play differently than other stuff? And I remember seeing them go, like, I'm so glad you asked that question, because they were like, well, it works like the tide, like as the tide kind of comes in, they get stronger and then it goes out. And I'm like, and it had kind of lit up for me in my mind. I understand more about what they mean when they say, if we can figure out how squats would work and be different and exciting, then we would do a squat army. And so it's kind of the same thing here. And then so they get mentioned briefly in 6th edition in the rule book as an abhuman species. And this generated a ton of excitement because it was like the first time they'd been mentioned in forever. And then in Necromunda Gang War 2, you see a squat prospector get added as a character. And then finally in 2022, they finally do release the Leagues of Votann, but initially they announced it on April Fool's Day.
Yes.
And then they had to go on the April 2nd and say, we really weren't kidding. And I'm sure this was all planned.
Right.
We really weren't kidding. Here's the model and here's what it looks like. And I think that I know amongst our group, it generated a ton of excitement.
One of my favorite things about the way that they introduced that is that, so April 1st, they released that trailer, and that night, it was a Friday, so that Friday evening, bunch of friends and I were on a Zoom call, a hobby Zoom call that we used to do during the pandemic. We were doing them like most Friday nights kind of thing, and everyone's like, oh yeah, well, it's obviously squats. They're bringing squats back, and I'm like, they are not bringing squats back. It's an April Fool's joke, absolutely. And they're like, they wouldn't have spent.
And it's a damn cruel April Fool's joke. I might add.
April Fool's joke. But they wouldn't. And they were like, they wouldn't have spent all that money on the animation for that particular piece. And it's like, well, you go back and have a look at that, and it's like 29 seconds of animation they could use anywhere, and there's 1 second of squat silhouette with a Scottish accent going, hey, what's up? What's going on?
Yeah.
And to cut to the point where one of friends, Brian Saab, was like, I bet you it is. And I was like, I bet you it isn't. And he was like, okay, why? What's it? What's the bet?
What's the bet?
And it was essentially like, it was, if it is true, Brian, I will paint you a squad, or if it's for Necromunda, I'll paint you a gang. If it's for 40K, I'll paint you a squad.
Oh my goodness.
Your choice. But I'm saying that confidently because it's not going to happen. And then at like 10 o'clock the next morning, it was like, hey Dave, you're painting me a gang. I was like,
nice.
Son of a bitch. So
Can you be
with it.
happy and sad at the
Oh,
same
yeah,
time?
it's the beautiful balance there. But the other part as well is that I get to paint more miniatures, so that was fun. For Christmas in 2022, I gave Brian his squat prospectors warband.
Nice.
Very nice.
Whatever.
Very nice. So yeah, I mean, from that
Yep.
perspective, right? They were introduced in Rogue Trader. They were kind of let go, and then brought back. But they're brought back as the Leagues of Votann, not squats, which I think is smart for a number of reasons. One, the term squats is silly and goofy, and they're trying to be grimdarky now. And
A little more.
and the reality
PC
is,
too.
Yeah, sure.
maybe
It's less derogatory.
Yeah.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
and maybe somebody more versed in the lore of it than even I am. They, like Imperial Guard, are still referred to as Imperial Guard, but their actual title is
The department is the Astra Militarum.
Yeah, the Astra Militarum, right? So that being said, let's talk a little bit about the army now and how it kind of fits into Warhammer 40K. So it's a replacement. It's a reinvention of a long beloved army in the 40K universe.
Yeah.
Clearly, again, it wasn't selling as well because it got reduced. I mean, literally, squatted became a term that was used to represent
feed it to the Tyranids.
The reduction of a unit or an army. It was such a joke within the community that anytime somebody mentioned it, people were saying, "Oh, well, we've reset the clock," and they'd post, Idris Elba resetting the clock gif because now, oh great, you've talked about them. Now it's going to be even longer until they come out. And so, in terms of how they fit into the 40K universe, I think they did a really great job on their lore. It's unlike anything else in the rest of the 40K universe. And so, Dave, since we brought you on, you want to talk a little bit about just the squats in their I guess I should stop calling them squats, the Votann, the Leagues of Votann, and their like kind of what they are, because they're different than anything else, and what we'll go into their power structure later, but in particular, let's talk a little bit about what the Votann themselves are.
Yeah. So,
and also the important evolution of squats and Leagues of Votann there is divergence there. They are not one and the same, which I'm sure Dave will cover here, but I can touch on that too.
Right.
Yeah. So, what I was going to say is, so part of the lore of the squats previously was strongholds, brotherhoods, and leagues. I think there's some information somewhere talking about like the 700 leagues. So those sort of structures existed, and it was a certain number of strongholds and brotherhoods that were interacting with the Imperium back in that in the Rogue Traders in the second edition, in sort of the Epic Space Marine, that kind of function. And when they disappeared, perhaps some of the squats were eaten by Tyranids at some point. But it's going back to that idea that 40K is all the story, all the lore comes from an unreliable narrator, and it's all canon and none of it's canon.
Right.
All those different things. So there's other things like the Demiurge, who are spacefaring miners, who sort of hung out with the Tau for a bit. When you listen to their descriptions, it's like, oh, they're squats. But it's like, no, they aren't squats. They weren't squats. Or maybe they were. Maybe they were these short of stature abhumans. Maybe they were short of stature Xenos breed. We don't know. Except, of course, we do. They were all from this sort of group. So the lore wise, I think the reintroduction as Leagues of Votann gave them a great GW a great opportunity to pick on a nice core thing, and I'm using the word core as a specific sort of a very focused word.
Yeah.
So they could look at that and come up with another reason why they're all of a sudden like, oh, they're back. Well, we were never gone. We were just somewhere else. We were over here where we've always been
Right.
the last.
Which is an area that hasn't really been explored in 40K.
No, not at all. So
the Galactic
history.
Core.
The Galactic Core, yeah. The
Yeah.
Galactic Core, and also there's the Ancestor Cores that we can get into in a little bit.
Yeah.
But Josh, you were talking about sort of squats and Leagues of Votann being different. Do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, so first there is a genetic divergence. Like squats, Demiurge, like Necromunda is a great example of this. Like squat prospectors and Necromunda are actual squats. They are true squats. No, they are, you know, the evolution of squats in the 41st millennia, still on the planet of Necromunda, and these are squats that have been in the kind of the Imperium space for however many millennia now, whereas the Leagues of Votann, or we'll get into more, are actually like a divergent genetic pool, largely because of the cloning. Which, Dave, if you want to jump into the cloning,
Sure.
the big thing though is that they are, while they started kind of at the same kind of base layer, there is a genetic divergence now that are defining, like the squats especially. Again, the only place that they officially, to my knowledge, exist in canon is Necromunda right now, but that's not to say they're not in other places in Imperial space. But the Votann are kind of this divergent. There was this great exodus from pre-Imperial Terra of the squats heading out into the stars.
Yeah, so there is that difference. There are a lot of similarities, and there's a similar, I guess, starting point, evolutionary point.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's a good way to put it.
They're a branch on the kind of the evolutionary journey of what stayed in the Imperium and what went out to the Galactic Core.
Yeah, exactly. Should we talk about the cloning now, or should we?
Actually, before you talk about the cloning, let me just talk about the Galactic Core a minute, because as I was researching this, like I found a really interesting thing from the Webb Space Telescope site. And so the Galactic Core is kind of the center, towards the center of the Milky Way galaxy at this point, which is where Warhammer 40,000 takes place. And a lot of times I get frustrated with 40K lore because it focuses so much on what is Mephiston doing, what is Calgar doing, like in a galaxy this big. Right. And the galaxy is so big. Like when you try to comprehend it, if you really, really try to think about it, it's mind altering how large it is. This was a quote from this Webb Space Telescope site that said, you know, if you lived at the center of the Milky Way galaxy, you would look up into the sky thick with stars, up to 1 million times denser than we're used to seeing.
Oh, wow.
The closest star to our sun is 4 light years away. In the center of the galaxy, stars are 0.4 to 0.04 light years apart. In the inner 10,000 light year range of the Milky Way galaxy, the galaxy's spiral arm structure has broken down and transformed into a bulge of stars at its heart. And the dominant force of that area of the galaxy is a black hole approximately 4 million times the mass of the sun, called Sagittarius A. Like,
that's big.
This is a hostile environment, though. Like, this makes for a very, especially over, when you think galactically, over a span of time, you probably have systems crashing into each other, things devouring each other, like just on a planetary and solar system scale. So I thought it was such a fascinating piece of lore. And then what you have is you have the Leagues of Votann, who have basically gone to this area because they are hardy miners, used to working in high density environments, high gravitational environments. This is where they thrive. And so I just thought the setting for them is very interesting. Now let's talk about what they are in terms of cloning, and then we can go into beyond
Sure
that.
thing. So the basic idea, we'll just talk the cloning bit. It's one of my favorite things about the lore is that so they are a broad number of I guess DNA strands. I don't know exactly how it works, but
seeds like versions.
So it's not just we're not talking cloning like we've got this one thing that will keep pulling the lever and the same thing comes out. We've got a wide divergence of them. Maybe it's 30, maybe it's 100, maybe it's 200, but they'll pull the lever and one of those will come out of the cloning vats.
Right. Just like that. There's another clone.
On cue.
There we go. Sorry about that. For some reason, my texts are coming through to my but anyway, so fantastic. So yes, ding ding. No, okay, that's all the clones we're getting today. But the clones have been tailored. These seeds have essentially been tailored to be able to be better at performing specific tasks. So if you want to have a medic, somebody who's going to be better as a medic, there's a clone for that.
A standard template construct almost.
Yeah.
So the
we need more medics.
Yeah, things have happened.
Just 3D print them out. Yeah.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
So the ancestor cores are these huge AIs that sit at the heart of the strongholds of the Votann. They're actually these AIs are called Votann. So, but none of the squads or the Leagues of Votann.
We should actually. They're called the kin or the kindred.
Sure,
That's
right?
what they call themselves.
So none of the kin would say to an imperial soldier, "Hey, why don't you come back to the stronghold and meet our large AI, the Votann?"
Right.
They're not going to do that sort of thing, but they do refer to themselves openly as the Leagues of Votann. Each one's just.
But what the Votann are not really widely known, which is also fascinating when you consider the Imperium's anti-AI bent, because of their problems with artificial intelligence in the past and uprisings there. So they are like it's interesting that this is the other side of the coin.
The Leagues have fully embraced their AI overlords, where the Imperium has just boot stomped that. Into oblivion. Yeah,
absolutely. But the Votann, the AI cores, the Votann are the ones that are going to say, okay, here's what's been happening. Here's the pattern of the growth or the expansion or the work that the stronghold's been doing. So let's plan ahead for what we're going to do, or we need to head in this direction or in that direction. Here are the types of kin that we're going to need to do that. So they plan ahead and grow the clones.
There's actually a when we get into talking about the various leagues themselves, there was a story here about a particular character in the Leagues of Votann, and how he was supposed to be this chosen one, or important individual, and one of the cool things in that story is like
Urhar the Destined.
That's like they knew that one was coming, they weren't sure which one it was, and then like the clone comes out, but like uninitiated, like the machinery suddenly builds like this sword that is specifically for him, and it's like, here's his sword. And they're like, oh, guess this is the guy. and it goes into how he's kind of a jerk, because mentally knowing that you must be, live up to this great destiny that the Votann, the machinery itself has determined, oh, you're going to be super important, is just fascinating. And I mean, these AI constructs are like on a whole nother level from from us, as you just mentioned. Like they're like thinking ahead probably thousands of years, and they are the most important thing to the
absolutely.
kin.
And from that sort of thing, I just want to say about Uthar the Destined, it's like if you've always been, if you look at any sort of hero stories or hero villain stories, it's if you've been told your entire life that you're like the savior, you don't turn out to be a wonderful person.
I'm sure you don't.
There's a lot of resentment in there somewhere.
people, I remember Justin Bieber when he was growing up, and I was just like, everybody's like, this kid's a jerk and blah, blah. I go, well, if you have all that money and all that attention and nobody ever says no to you, I go, I'd be a jerk too. I'd be a little full of myself as well. I was like, man. So I mean, and think of that on like a even bigger scale, like the entire species is going to be, you're going to save the species. Great.
No pressure.
So that's a fascinating, and this is the first thing about the Leagues of Votann that like caught my attention when I was reading through the lore was the Votann themselves and how they're these gigantic AI structures and fortresses, and how everything revolves around it. It just made so much sense. Like the name of the army made so much sense once that was that information was given to me. So I think it's a fascinating twist on what were just space dwarves, and now they operate in the most hostile environments, and they they're technologically highly advanced.
They haven't had to deal with any of the Adeptus Mechanicus sort of what's the word I'm looking for?
The fall, and then the adulation or
worship of what was, and they're determined. The Adeptus Mechanicus are very much determined not to create anything new, not to innovate, whereas the Votann have been able to innovate. It's like, let's try this thing, let's try that thing, let's do this, let's do all the other stuff, and let's advance our weaponry. What do we need to do next? There's some great stuff. I'm not sure if we've got it listed further later in the show notes, but
I think the fascinating thing there is they still do worship technology.
Well,
right, but that technology is intelligent technology,
right?
Less as a worship, but more of a
less of a deity.
Yeah, less of a deity, more of a reverence for knowledge paths.
Yeah. So this leads to a very interesting point, and actually, let's talk about when a Votann, when a kin dies, right? He's returned to the Votann, and everything that he is, everything that he or she is and has learned, is subsumed, I guess, subsumed into the Votann's databanks. And this is incredibly important to the kin because it's a continuation of their life. Like everything that they have done is not lost at that point, to the point where the biggest punishment that can happen to a Votann, or excuse me, a kin, is, hey, you are
you're banished,
excommunicated, and sent off, exiled, and you will never, everything you have learned, everything you have done will never be shared. And that is like the worst thing that can happen to a kin. Execute me, fine, but everything goes back in. But if my life has come to an end at that point, it's just a fascinating.
The description of that, the exiling, and that for Votann, just like their mindset and their society, like for a lot of them, to the idea of being exiled, like they would rather them had never drawn breath, like never been born, never been grown, than to be exiled. Like it's that big of a deal for them.
I think
And
I
the
think one of
thing
the
that,
important
oh,
things
sorry,
for
go
us to
ahead, Dave.
mention is we've been talking about clones and the idea like there are X number of clone seeds or whatever. Is that not everybody that comes out, their personalities aren't identical. Their
Right.
personalities are their own. Uh,
And it
yeah,
develops and diverges as they grow, right? And have experiences that
yeah.
others don't.
So I just wanted to mention that. So it's
Yeah.
not a whole bunch of mindless automatons walking.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
It's
Oh, no,
very much,
no. Yeah, yeah. They have their own desires and yada yada.
They're all individuals,
The
even if they share
fascinating,
a genetic pool.
yeah,
yeah. The fascinating thing about this to me is the Games Workshop basically launched effectively a whole
yep,
new race with this. And it made me really appreciate, so the codex that we currently have for Votann for Leagues of Votann is
partition, yeah,
9th edition, and it's fairly thin. But that's not to say, there you go. That's not to say there's not a ton of thought given to, and while there may not be like a lot of examples of things that you may see in other codexes, there's clearly a ton of thought given to what is this entire race like.
Yeah.
And I just don't want that to be undersold, because where I really learned to appreciate this was when we covered the Eldar, or Aldari as they're now called. But like, when I looked at how they came out and how they were originally thought about and what they look like now, it's indistinguishable. Like, the entire society was thought of, the paths and all that they go through were all thought of before they were ever released. And it's a brilliant piece of work. And I think that when the company launches something like Leagues of Votann, a lot of care and thought is given to what does the society of these people look like? What does their race mean? And so what we have in this 9th edition codex, and I've held off on doing this show of force because I really wanted to kind of wait for another codex and see like how much they grow. But it's such a fascinating, as I read more about it, I was like, wow, this is really deep. Like, they've really thought this through, and there's potential for growth. And like they're how they interact with the Imperium and how they interact with other Xenos. Another clone was born. They at one point they would openly trade with Xenos and such, and then they felt betrayed. I want to say by the Aldari, if I remember correctly, and so now they're very anti-Xenos, but they've also worked with the Imperium now. And in fact, the two things that those two probably agree on is their anti-Xenos stance and their xenophobic take on each other. But that doesn't mean they haven't come into conflict as well. I mean, to the point where the Tau originally got some of their technology from the Leagues of Votann.
It's one of those things as well. There are so many leagues and guilds and that sort of thing that have been out throughout the galaxy, that you'll find that there are some that the Tau will be like, oh yeah, we want to trade with you. If they come across more kin, they'll go, oh yeah, we love trading with your brothers. We want to trade with you, and you'll be like, oh, I didn't think so. No. So there's a lot of stuff that
no, Mr. Fish.
I don't think so. But where as gamers and as fans, I guess more of a fandom thing, we want to know that, oh yeah, this is how the kin react, and this is what they do, and this is what they do in this situation, and this is why so and so doesn't like them. And it's like, there's so much going on, and they're in so many different places that what's true here is not necessarily true over here. It's different.
Right.
It's interesting too. Some of the leagues are very exploration based, or like they're more likely to be mercenaries, which they will participate in wars of obviously other races at that point, other Xenos species aside from themselves. But they'll go out and they'll get experience and learn, and some of them they're just very much trying to acquire this information and bring it back and know what to expect, or they're trying to go get resources, and the best way to go get this kind of resource is to work for a different species and then bring do some freelance work there, some mercenary work, and then bring that back to, and it's all for the betterment of society. But it's interesting how that line gets crossed or blurred depending what the motivation is. But overall, society, they reference so many times of like just how conservative of a mindset, how hard it is to change a mind, how slow to be convinced or to like, you know, change an opinion, the just the overall kin society is.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
one of the other things I was going to say along those lines is that in there they talk a lot about generally the what they're going to do is pretty much there's a nice broad like everybody knows what they're going to do. The conversations come down to how they're going to go about it. What's best for our guild? What's best for our stronghold? Okay, that's great. We know we're all working towards the same thing, but we're going to throw around different ideas. The conversations are how do we achieve that? How do we get there?
Yeah. And so actually that's an interesting jump off for how they're organized, because, you know, as you said, there's X amount of strains of
the clone schemes,
you know, how they're what they're cloned from, clone schemes, let's call it.
What scheme?
You have, so the basic social unit for them are called clans, the kin clans. And this is like a family unit, if you think like an extended large family unit. They're self-sufficient. They can handle internal affairs independently of any advice. They can do whatever they need to do. But they come together for, as you were just talking about, kind of working to how do we get there? They come together for larger communal projects. Above the kin clans are then the kindreds, which are groups of kin clans that get together to solve and oversee coordination among each other and space, or handle larger issues that are kind of like a regional authority. And these are usually led by a high thane, who is responsible for the overall decisions and, I guess, governance and military leadership of what they're going to do and how they're going to go about doing it. And then the name of the thing are above the kindreds are the leagues. And these are where you have multiple kindreds operating together and working together. And these are called leagues. And these are kind of the staple, the principal military and political and structure of Votann civilization. And so each of these are now governed by a council of high thanes. So where the high thane is kind of over the kindred, now you have, you know, maybe you have 50 kindreds, you have 50 high thanes. They're all now in Congress kind of deciding amongst themselves. And then there's always one among them who's kind of like the chief high thane kind of individual. And then above that are the Votann, the actual ancestor cores. And then within the Leagues of Votann, you have specialized guilds that operate across clans and kindreds. And these will focus on specific crafts or industries. And this really feeds, or even military, this really feeds into the dwarf kind of aspect, the dwarf and space kind of aspect, where it's like, oh, these are the guys who make all the weapons, or these are the guys who make all the gold rings, you know, especially these 7 of them.
Yeah, right.
You know?
One really big one.
Yeah. And so within that, the military structure of the Leagues of Votann is also super organized. It's highly organized. It includes ranges of specialized units, which we then see represented in the codex itself. But these can all be called upon by the League to go out and do whatever campaigns they need them to do. So, and then there's some cultural and religious elements within this as well. I mean, we talked about guilds, which handle kind of the creation and technologies and advancements, and probably science and research and development, that kind of stuff. You have the military structure, which is actually the military that's going off and taking part in all the battles and campaigns and whatnot. And then you have kind of the cultural and religious elements. So you have traditions. And again, this speaks right to the space dwarves of it. The kin have a strong sense of honor and duty. They're guided by respect for the wisdom of their ancestors, which is, again, maintained by the Votann, because everything you learn and process goes back into the Votann. And they have rituals and ceremonies that often reflect this. It's very fascinating to me how the structure they build in space is really science fiction dwarves and or science fantasy, I should say, dwarves in space. Like, and it matches up, but doesn't seem ham-fisted.
Right.
It's done so well in this codex. You know, it could have easily just been, hey, they're just dwarves in space, but there's a whole lot to it. And the Votann are just fascinating. And I mean, I don't know that they talk about the origination of the Votann themselves. I assume they were built at some point by the kin, but
there's some speculation if they were original like first ancestors, like became the Votann, built the Votann. And there's depictions. They mentioned some depictions other... like the Votann are, and this is it gets into myth. Like the Leagues of Votann actually don't know how far back their history is. Especially they
you think they could just ask the vote?
That's
42.
40 exactly.
The Votann aren't like all super with it anymore. So, yeah.
They're also experiencing issues. But if you think about it, it's fascinating because, I mean, as a supercomputer, which is effectively, I think, what we're talking about, like an AI supercomputer, it's basically sending out Votann to gather more information to supplant it or to supplement it. And everything it learns, it's learning from these organic clones that it's sending out to go do X, Y, or Z, and then come back and tell me what's going on. So, I mean, it's also beholden. It's a very symbiotic relationship.
But it's interesting because asking the Votann a question, they're like, oh, you know, it could be something instantaneous, or it could take a couple hundred years to get that answer back from it, just as it's going through its archives. And like it might have the information, but how it is able to access it or how it's been archived and compressed and filed away, it doesn't mean they just have limited information. You know, it's not the internet at their fingertips. It's still this complex situation, and only a certain few are able to actually communicate and interface with the Votann themselves.
I do wonder if some of the inspiration for this came from Douglas Adams and Deep Thought. And I mean, there are some parallels there, right? Like
42.
If you haven't read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, like, you need to do yourself a favor and go read it. But there are some parallels here that I hadn't thought of until we were just having this discussion. So, so that's how their structure works. What are some things they've done to drive events within the 40K universe? I mean, we talked a little bit about they traded with the Tau, so they actually introduced ion weaponry to the Tau. And I mean, this is a great thing about the 40K universe too, is you can kind of retcon a little bit of this. Like you can be like, well, this is where they got it. You know, oh, I thought they were all eaten by the Tyranids. Well, that group was, but this group.
How are the Tau able to develop these weapons so quickly? Well, maybe they bought some from these guys over here.
Yeah,
you mean these guys? Yeah, those guys.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. They do ally with the Imperium from time to time. I talked about their perceived hatred of other Xenos. Again, and Dave, you make a good point. I mean, that's a very generalization, right? As we know, people are very different, and where you come from on this planet makes you a very different person. And what is important to you and what isn't important to you may change. I mean, I think there's still some fundamentals there, but in general, you know, what are people's priorities may change significantly based on where you are and what experience you've had.
I think in regards as well to the 40K background, when you have the Imperium led by the God Emperor sitting on his throne on Terra, and there's the ecclesiarchy that is putting out the word of this is the word of the God Emperor kind of thing. everybody has to follow this. It feels much more like there's a single driving force. We know that there isn't.
Yeah.
That there's multiple driving forces and everything's interpreted differently, and there's lots of infighting and greed and corruption and all that sort of thing. But the Votann and the many different Votann that live at the hearts of these strongholds, many different strongholds that the kin have, are each are interested in the survival of their stronghold, but they don't necessarily have an overarching mission beyond keeping their stronghold alive and prospering.
And I actually think that leads to some of the most interesting stories within the Warhammer 40K universe. When things are very binary, I think they're boring. When you have like Aaron Dembski, Bowden, Black Legion and Talon of Horus are two of my favorite novels that he's written in all of 40K, honestly. And one of the fascinating things about that is all the areas of gray that those characters are operating in, and things aren't just, even to the Chaos guys who are just like, yeah, okay, so you worship this Chorus Emperor guy, you know, but, and we have some feelings about that, but, you know, really I'm more interested in this, you know. And it's that's where I think the really interesting stories lie, and that's where I think they've hit it really well with the leagues here. The other thing is they you know, we all like, one of the interesting things about Tau is, well, how do they move around a galaxy where the Imperium can basically get across the entire galaxy, and it may take them a while to do so. Like the Tau are much slower. So how do the Leagues of Votann move around? They do use warp travel, but they use it a bit differently than the Imperium does. They do a lot of short warp jumps. Their warp technology is actually way more dependable than the Imperium's warp technology, but they don't do it in large leaps like the Imperium does. They will do a lot of short dives into the warp and out of the warp, and along the way they will, oh, well, we're here, let's mine this planet, or let's do this resource. So I mean, it will take them a lot longer to get somewhere, but they usually, this is all planned out by the Votann in advance, like this is where you're going to go, or what have you. But even then, they don't have true psychers. They have people that are maybe psycher. It was kind of vague. Like they're kind of psycher sensitive, but they utilize other tools to open that window for them, allowing them to do this. So like even they don't have like a navigator that, you know, passes through the warp. Nobody, they're not at risk like that when they're traveling the warp, you know.
It goes back to that.
There's a type of clone that is like infused with the trying to remember that psychoactive clone skin. And that's this allows them to interface with their technology. So they're not psychers in the sense that they can manifest psychic powers, anything like that. They're not up to that level. They're still just a tiny, they're like a little single LED light in the great vastness of soul. And actually, one thing we should mention, just the Leagues of Votann in general are a much less visible soul compared to Eldari, humans, etc., psychers especially. So they're a diminished presence from their soul perspective. So demons and things like that aren't that interested in them. They don't have a huge warp presence at all. They don't have psychers. They do have these a certain genetic lineage of these psychoactive clones that allow them to interface with technology that allows them to utilize warp technology, but they're not actively projecting psychers in a traditional sense. And it's really interesting how they are able to their travel is it's much safer, but it's also predictable, which is really hard to say about the warp. Just to go on to the point you were saying there.
That goes back again to that the dwarven analog. Dwarves in Warhammer are basically, they don't have
non-magical.
They don't have wizards. They have their own basically, just by instead of being dwarves, they dispel. Or magic doesn't work against them as well as it might against somebody else.
They have runes and things like that in fantasy, where here they are utilizing technology to essentially replicate that rune effect of
Yeah.
we have a smaller magic presence, psychic presence, but then we are able to use these the genetic lineage of these particular flavor of clones in order to activate these rune devices, which allow them to. I think they even call them wards. I'm trying to remember now.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to mention that, like that, this is how they're, and their ships are massive, by the way.
Yes.
Their ships are huge. In fact, I'm reading a short story I'll talk about in a little bit involving them in one of their ships. So, okay. Anything we want to add there, Dave? Did we miss anything? Probably a bunch. There's a lot in this.
That's the thing. There's so much information in that 9th edition codex.
Yeah.
That extracting it and assembling it,
summarizing the bullet points.
But I think we've covered a lot. So, yep.
All right. So let's talk about, typically when we started these show of forces, we'd be like, okay, we're going to talk about Space Marines, and then each of us will pick our favorite Space Marine chapter and we'll talk about it. Here, I figured we'd talk a little bit about kind of what league or what's your favorite flavor here that drew you to this. And Dave, why don't you go first since you're the actual one with this army.
When I saw the notes, it was like flavor. It was like I didn't realize it was picking the lead.
But that's okay. It doesn't have to be.
Skeins, or the clone skeins. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but that aspect is something that I really love about the Leagues of Votann, about just that the ancestor cores determining what's going to be best for the stronghold, and how do I keep my people alive? How do I keep them surviving and thriving? And knowing that, okay, well, we're going to need more of these, more of those. Let's put them out into the world and see if it works.
It was interesting to hear you discuss that, because until you kind of put it the way you had put it, I didn't think about it that way as I read through the story. Because I mean, the fiction is fairly dense in some regards in this. And so hearing you put it that way, I was like, oh, of course, like that makes a ton of sense. Hey, we need X number of warriors. We need X number of, builders. We need, it's almost like
some guys the Votann. The Votann are selecting what kind of adaptations are going to be needed for whatever this project is coming up. So they're going to add these characteristics on top of kind of your base kin template actually is interesting. One thing they talked about too is some of the clone skeins that are added to you will actually have a physical manifestation, whether it's like a chemical smell or your eyes glow blue or something like that, depending on what's been added and how that is obviously human society, physical characteristics, and there's all kinds of problems with racism and stuff like that. Where just these different characteristics, where the Leagues of Votann don't have that whatsoever. You have this function, and it's more of a point of pride of oh, you're really good at this one thing, and I could tell because your eyes are glowing blue, and that's awesome. And there's no less than because of that. It's oh, you are this plus this specialist thing on top of that. That's cool. We accept, and it's celebrated instead of fought over.
Yeah. Right. So I chose the Greater Thurian League. It contains over 200 allied kindreds, so this is quite a few. I mean, this is a massive league. I kind of thought of them as, in some ways, almost like the Ultramarine.
Yeah, they're very much the poster child for. The box art is Thurian, Greater Thurian League. Yeah,
the white with the green. Kind of, yeah. So they're known to ally as mercenaries with the Imperials, which I thought makes them kind of interesting. But even more interesting than that is they're kind of in a situation where they're on the front lines of this battle with chaos, as this massive warp storm called Orgrivar has opened up in kind of their northeastern border. But then down to their So because of that, and because they've had like these massive forces deployed into this sector to deal with all the chaos incursions, they also have sent huge amount of forces out other directions to look for worlds and systems that they can fall back to in case the cost of the war against chaos becomes so costly, so overwhelming that they need to fall back. And so what this has done, though, is as these large forces have kind of moved out and said, okay, well, we need to find areas to fall back to, they've run into Imperial forces there, Imperial governors on their planets, who then panicked because all of a sudden they see like this, what they think is an invasion force show up. I don't know what their intention was. I don't know if their intention was to invade or just, they could have probably had some discussions at this point, but the governors panic. They send out distress signals to the rest of Imperium. And now like all these Imperial forces show up. And so now the Greater Thurian League finds itself fighting a battle on two fronts where they were really probably just looking for, hey, is this a place we can go? No. Okay, we'll go over here. So now they find themselves in this huge war on two fronts. But I just found that to be a pretty fascinating situation.
When you're in a
that's actually
go ahead. Very pragmatic. You can find yourself in those problems.
Sorry. Yeah. But it's pretty fascinating, I think. And again, as you said, they're kind of the poster children of the kindred, or the kin. Rather. And so I find that to be appealing to me to some degree. A lot of people look down on that like poster child kind of thing, but they're that way for a reason. I mean, the Ultramarines are their color scheme is very dynamic when you look at it on a poster or you look at it on the cover of something. The Black Legion, I think, I would not have thought to have done Black Legion before, but something about it really appealed to me. Actually, it was Aaron Dembski-Bowden's description of the Black Legion invading a planet that I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds awesome. I want to do that. So, gravitating towards, of course, the poster children of the Leagues of Votann to me didn't seem that unreasonable. Josh, what about you?
So something you said just reminded me of something we didn't mention about the lore, but like every engagement that the Votann participate in, it's this kind of risk reward thing that they're always analyzing. Is this engagement worth, like, are we going to get the payoff here? So in that instance where the Imperium is coming to fight them, like the Votann weren't there to fight. They were just either trying to collect resources or were on their travels, and then the Imperium happened to counteract to them, but they don't have any reason to engage with the Imperium in that sense, unless they're going to net some huge resource gain or something like that. So every action really is like, how is this going to better us until we get into grudges and things like that, which I guess we actually didn't really talk about all that much either.
We'll talk about gameplay later.
Perfect.
Yeah.
But
Josh, I mean, think about that. And if you think about that from a psychological perspective, right? When you aren't afraid to die because, if you die, you get brought back to the Votann and everything that was important to you lives on. I'm not to say you're not afraid of death, but like when the fear of that unknown is lessened from you, whether you engage in this battle or not becomes the purely mathematical, approach. Hey, is it worth the cost? Yeah.
And for them, there's no shame. Like if the battle tips to a point where like, oh, we need to cut the losses. Like it's not this engagement is no longer mathematically viable and worthwhile for us to participate in. Like they'll just pick up and leave because they need to spend those resources elsewhere. And it's not like they don't view it as a cowardice or anything like that. They're like, no, this expedition is not making money anymore. We're going to turn it around.
Yeah.
It's very practical, very like that dwarven practicality again, which is cool. So I went with the Trans-Hyperion Alliance, and these are essentially the shortening I had for them these are the Star Trek dwarves. The reason I picked them, partially because they have a really cool orange color scheme, and the orange colors always call to me in gaming for some reason. I was just talking to Colin Ward the other day, and I was like, "Orange is my game color, apparently." I keep painting it. But even like on a board game, I always pick orange. So, that's part of it. But they are very much the Star Trek approach to the Votann. So they're really scattered. They're spread out. They're always exploring. They're kind of a fleet based kindred. Their strongholds are all on fleets. Their Votans are actually on ship. So they're always in movement. They're spread out across the thing. They have 3 Votann, which is kind of a big deal. Not all of them have multiple Votann. Not every league has multiple Votann, we should say. And they're really dedicated to enriching their Votann. So they're all about exploring the unexplored, bringing back that information, bringing back those resources to the Votann, so the Votann can enrich its knowledge base and expansion. And I think of them in the an RTS computer game with Fog of War. Like, they're the guys that are just going out to reveal the map. Like, that's
clearing up
their
the map.
goal is to reveal the map. If they get resources along the way, or they learn something about a race they encounter, they're all about that. So it's really all exploration, and they are one of the riskier leagues, I would say, because they are so spread out and they keep pushing the boundaries of kin territory, that if they die while they're exploring, there is a chance they will not be reunited with the ancestors into the Votann core. So there's definitely a little extra element of risk, but for them, it's absolutely worth it because they're gaining so many resources and knowledge and things like that. And it was just a really kind of cool approach to them.
Again, probably the most scary prospect for a kin, right? So, yeah. All right, well, let's do this. We're going to take a short break, then we'll come back. We'll start talking about the models, the units a little bit, and then kind of finish up our thoughts there. So we'll be right back. All right, and we are back. We're still talking Leagues of Votann, but let's talk a little bit about the models. And this was such an evolution from the old models to me. Like, it was, I mean, clearly, like, Games Workshop, the technology has improved, the skills have improved, the scale has gotten a little bit bigger. But for me, and I'm gonna go through and we picked one each that we like, because the line itself is not super large at this point. In fact, I would love to see it continue to grow. I think this could be one of those like staple armies in 40K if they continue to invest.
I think when their codex releases, they'll have one of the most significant model lines to go with it as far as the 10th edition codexes go. So I don't know when it's going to drop in the lineup of codexes, but I have a feeling it'll be a pretty big release.
Yeah, I hope so. For me, my favorite model, and it's probably because it literally harkens back to Dwarves in Space, is the Grimnir. You know, when the Votann first came out, I was like, okay, it's some dwarves in power armor. I mean, the armor looks cool. Like, I'm into it. Okay. But how is it different than Space Marines, right? How, you got dwarves in Space Marines. I mean, how is it really different to me? Like, but when the Grimnir came out and they showed it, and the Grimnir is kind of almost looks like a priest or like a
wizard.
The type of sorcerer type, right? Yeah, I mean, when I saw this model, it could almost fit directly into a fantasy dwarf line, but you could see how it fit into the rest of the force as well, as kind of a leader unit. And it just, like, when the model came out, like, I immediately was like, I might have to buy a Space Dwarf army, because, well, and much like my Black Legion, like, once I visually have in my head a representation of, like, here's what I want the force to look like, I could picture this guy kind of in the back, kind of leading the force forward, and it just had this great science fantasy. I hesitate to ever say science fiction with 40K, but it had like this science fantasy vibe to me that I was just like, it's so cool. And the kit is cool too, in the sense that there's I think there's a male and female version of it in the same kit, unless I'm mistaken. Dave, but I've seen
I'm not sure.
pictures of
I haven't. I actually didn't jive with the Grimnir model. Yeah.
Really? That's interesting. What was
That
it about it
was
that you didn't like?
for all the reasons that you liked it. I didn't like it.
Oh,
Yeah.
My reaction to it. Yeah. It was.
That's
It was
interesting.
kind of weird. So I haven't bought that box.
Dave, how does it feel to be wrong?
It feels great.
Nice.
No, but I mean, seriously, I think that's really fascinating. That like, what I liked about it, you don't like. If you were going to use this unit, would you like kit bash something else together for it?
We've got a picture of it later in the. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I put the deck together, of course. Yeah. So anyway, that's what I really dug about it. That's why I really like this model.
It's funny because it does stand out.
Josh,
because it is the most fantasy, where the rest of the line is very like traditional science fiction, science fantasy.
Yeah.
Where that one could fit either way. One thing I'll mention, just because we didn't really talk about it in the lore section, is that the Grimnir are the ones who are actually communicating with the Votann. They are the guys with access, the guys and gals with access to the Votann themselves. So they play a very important role in society of actually being the ones that are interfacing with the Votann themselves.
One of the things as well that I was going to mention is that so they have two basically little robots that fly around with them.
Yeah.
And this is the
really
interesting connection with more sort of a Viking aspect, a Norse aspect, is that those two are called corvs.
Yeah. Your two ravens.
Yeah. They're the ravens for corvs.
They're called what?
Corv.
Oh, interesting.
Corvids, raven.
How interesting. Yeah. They're called the Grimnir are also known as the living ancestors. So yeah, they're the ones that interface with the Votann. Like not anybody can just go walk up and talk to them.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of ceremony.
Hey, I was just wondering, what should I have for lunch today?
You always got to have the onions.
Josh,
what would be Hearthkin Salvagers, and this is a kill team box that was released specifically, and these are kind of your standard Hearthkin with some additionals. So it's an extra sprue in the box on top of your normal Hearthkin. It's kind of the perfect box of Votann infantry in my mind. They have heavy weapon guy, which is like kind of hanging back. I just love the way he's holding his like rotary cannon. Or there's two weapon options for that. Really cool. There's a guy with a jump pack, which is unique. Maybe there'll be more of this model as a unit, but as of right now, as far as I know, it's just the one. But he's really cool. Just very much like a belt, like space belt miner. Like he's out in space with his little like moving around maneuverable jump jet in order to fix a ship or mine this ore that's in an inaccessible spot or something like that. The mixture of this kit has a little bit more like some more tools, some more pouches, some more like bandoliers of things like that. They just have a little bit more detail to them, and for me, the Votann in general, you kind of your default aesthetic is very much StarCraft, like Marines and fire bats kind of like merged together. And this box more than any other, I think, really brings that to life for me. But the aesthetic of that kind of the StarCraft aesthetic brought to life in miniature form for me was like immediately is like, oh, this is a cool looking range. But this box in particular, that extra detail and a little bit more personality you get for me really, really stood out.
Yeah.
The jump pack's an interesting introduction too. Like I think you can look at this and kind of get a sense of, is this kind of maybe where they'll go with some additional units as they come out. I think the jump pack unit is. You might get really a jump pack
unit. You might get a heavy weapon unit, like that one guy just holding the gun there, like Gatling style, the kind of underslung. I think is really cool, and hopefully there's a unit that comes out that's just a bunch of dudes lugging around heavy weapons.
It is a really, really nice kit. It is a really nice kit.
The vehicles,
Dave?
I love the vehicles. I love that moon buggy feel.
Yes.
The big puffy tires, the roll cage, the curves, the extra panels. It's very much it has that wonderful near future hard sci-fi aesthetic. I really, really.
So, you know
Yeah,
how
yeah,
you didn't
yeah.
like
You
the
hate.
Grimnir?
Oh wow,
Where I get,
this is fascinating.
where I get to
This
talk again?
was
Sweet.
this was the this no this this was though the
All right.
thing that least appealed to me on initial blush, right? But
Yeah.
here's the thing with me. Like a lot of times my first initial reaction changes over time. And so when I first saw them, I was kind of like, well, those are a choice, you know. As time went on, like they grew on me. Like I you know, initially when I saw like rhinos and land raiders, I was like, I think land raiders are really dumb looking. And now I'm like, they're like the greatest thing ever. Yeah. Like I just think they're cool looking now. Sometimes it takes me time to like get it. The moon buggy kind of aesthetic, initially I was kind of like, I don't know if this really works for me in a 40K kind of setting. But the more it went on and the more I learned about the Leagues of Votann and where they operate, the more I was like, oh, well, this makes sense, right? That they have like this kind of vehicle that's probably incredibly durable because it's used to dealing with these dangerous environments that, you know. And so as I kind of turned that corner, I was like, oh yeah, I kind of get it. Like I like them. Okay, I like them now. You know, but like you, with the Grimnir, like I was like kind of put off by them. I was like, yeah, all right, you know, it's kind of weird, you know. And then as I learned more about it, I was like, okay, they're kind of cool.
Yeah, no, they definitely.
I love the Hecaton land fortress being a homage in a way to the old squat land trains.
Yeah.
So you still have the land fort, and they're a little bit of a silly looking vehicle. Like I love the Sagittarius, but the land fortress for me are a little silly. But there's such a functional, like practical approach to vehicles in warfare. Yeah, like
I used to think they were silly too.
I think they're cool. They're also silly.
Speaking of the land train thing, one of my favorite things about the Hecaton land fortress is at the back it has a hitch location.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
There's nothing else in the range that meshes with that. So that's
it hitches into it.
Yet.
Oh, I wonder, do the Necromunda, like the Cargo 8 Ridge Haulers, is it the same connection?
No, I don't think it is.
Did they do it?
They didn't. No.
Missed opportunity. Cool. That would have been awesome.
But, yeah, no, I'm hoping that that one of the things in the Codex drop is something that connects to that. I don't know what it does, whether it carries more guys, whether it's any aircraft platform. It could be all sorts of stuff.
Neat, yeah.
But yeah, again, harkening back to that land train from the Epic Space Marine.
So let's go reverse order then, since we were just talking about the Hecaton land fortress. Dave, why don't you talk about units in the Codex that appeal to you, that you would basically always field if given a choice?
So for me, I love to start with the Hecaton land fortress, mainly because I love looking at the model on the table.
Yeah.
It's super durable. It's dependable. You can pack some incredible firepower on there.
How big is that in person? Just I haven't actually seen one physically myself. Yeah,
I haven't seen one in person either.
Like half.
It's like a taller Land Raider.
Half a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
It's taller than a Land Raider. It's probably not as wide as a Land Raider, and maybe just about as long, maybe a little bit underneath.
Yeah. Okay. You know, it's interesting that you say it, because I mean, I don't know what it costs points wise, but I imagine it's not cheap. And so I think a unit like that, like a Land Raider, is something that you build an army around, right? Like I'm not building an army and going, boy, you know, what am I going to put these guys in? I know, a Land Raider. It's usually like, I want a Land Raider. Exactly. What am I going to put in it?
Right. Yeah.
Let me just pull up there we go. Pulling up the card. Yeah. So I obviously don't have the points value here, but toughness 12, 16 wounds, 2+ save.
Yeah. Okay.
Beefy. Yeah.
It's a lot of wounds. Yeah. And a 2+ save, you said, because it operates in the most dangerous environments.
40K battlefields.
Yeah.
But
That's right.
yeah, there's a bunch of weapons you can put on top. When it first came out in 9th edition, the way that we'll talk about judgment tokens in the future, that the way the judgment tokens worked then meant that it was basically the only weapon you'd put on there was the let me make sure I get the name absolutely correct, heavy magna rail cannon. But when they started changing the way the judgment tokens work, people moved to the cyclic ion cannon or the heavy conversion beamer. It's at a point where it's really whichever one you prefer. In my opinion, it's at that point. I went with the magna rail cannons because I thought magna rail cannons are awesome. Just as a concept,
sounds cool.
Accelerating this awesome.
It's like a railgun.
Yeah, exactly. It's a railgun. So, but that particular one it's one shot, it's 4+ to hit, but it's strength 18, -4 AP, D6 +6 damage.
Oof. Oh, that's a big hit.
Holy smokes. Okay. So, but an interesting point you mentioned there is 4+ to hit, because when you pair that with grudges, and that's where it's no longer just 4+ to hit, like it gets even better. So yeah, that's the fascinating thing. It's 225 points.
Does that have the
just so you know? So that's a
heavy word on that weapon.
It does have heavy. So if you're stationary,
so if you hold still, it's a 3-up, and then a grudge token is 2-up. Woo!
Oh my god! And it's devastating wounds as well.
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
Yeah. So it's
okay.
I like it.
That's a good gun.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I also said that I like the Einherjar Hearthguard, who are the essentially mini Terminators. They've got the super durable. They're like the old exo armor guys, squats from back in the day, except the armor plating just looks so much better. It looks fantastic.
How do you find that to paint with these guys? Like, is it very Space Marine type
that's
painting, or
is it like the when I was painting mine, going through and painting my army, I was like, okay, I've got like a jade colored undersuit and white armor plates.
Yeah.
The Hearthguard are all armor plates, so very little that isn't an armor plate.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, and from my opinion, the ones that they've painted for the studio armies look a bit boring because they've just gone, okay, our armor plates are this color, so the time model is that one color. For mine, I had to go, okay, well,
right.
I decided that as you move further down the model, the plates go from white to gray. They're still in there. They still have that white, sort of big, solid, chunky look at the top, but it fades down to that gray in their lower armor plates. So painting them is actually pretty easy. You just got to decide what your armor plate is and how you're going to tackle that problem. Well, in my opinion, problem. How you're going to overcome it. But so that's what I've done for mine. But they're also super dependable firepower wise, because they've got, not only do they have their either the plasma gun or the Volkite disintegrators, they also have a grenade launcher over the top, so they put out a lot of firepower. If you go with the plasma, you can start shooting down a lot of Marines or sort of equivalent sort of stuff, and the grenade launcher on top can really handle Eldar or Imperial Guard, that kind of thing. So big fan of them.
Nice.
And they're pretty solid in melee as well, I think.
Okay.
But the best thing to do with them, though, is pair them with an Einherjar champion. And the Einherjar champion is just a brutal beast in combat. I'm going to shuffle through the...
Does he add anything to them specifically?
Does he buff
champion? Like, does he... Like, I put a chaos sorcerer with my Terminators because he rerolls charges.
Amazing.
Terminators. And listen,
the first ability of the Einherjar
champion,
Exemplar ability here. While this model is leading a unit, you can reroll charge rolls made for this unit.
There you go.
Perfect.
There you go.
Fitting.
There you
Yeah.
go. They need it where those little legs, like they just shuffle along.
But Mass Driver Accelerators, each time this model ends a charge move, you can select one enemy unit within engagement range of this unit and roll a d6. On a 2 to 5, that enemy unit suffers d3 mortal wounds. On a 6, it suffers d3 plus 2.
Oh my god! Does he have precision?
He does not. No, that's an ability that he has. So, but then his weapons, like if you give him the hammer, it's strength 12, d6 plus 1 damage. So he can go into vehicles, or he can go in. He might be able to deal with one of those Forge Fiends. I don't
know. Yeah. Oh, easily. Yeah. Yeah. He'll take a Forge Fiend down, no problem.
He's a super solid sort of
that is
leader
awesome.
For that unit.
That is awesome. Yeah. Josh, what did you pick?
Yeah, I went with the Brockhier Iron Master as the first and foremost there, and this is kind of a Tech Marine and Apothecary hybrid model, which is cool. So they can repair models, bring guys back to life. It is a cool looking model, but he also gives the Thunderkin +1 to hit. And this, I think, works both in melee and range. And the Thunderkin, which is my second choice here, just because they pair so well there, have some really, really cool weapons. They have some conversion beamers. They have some like kind of Gatling type weapons. They have graviton blast cannons. And these are decent things for their you kind of higher AP, multi damage. They're more of like the heavy weapon kit, and these got kind of cool models too, in that they're guys inside of an exoskeleton of sorts.
Yeah. And
this is very much like mining equipment that has been militarized, and I think that's a cool approach to it, not only from the model wise, but it makes them tougher. They have I think more wounds. I think they're 3 wounds a pop. 3 up save, toughness 6. So yeah, they're pretty durable. And just have a cool weapon platform that not is easier to hit with, and gets healed by having the Iron Master in tow with them. So that was just kind of a cool little combo unit that stood out to me. And then going in the completely opposite direction of that, I really like the Hurricane Pioneers. So these are kind of the skimmer bikes. And the cool thing about them is that
these bikes
they're
are
fast, they're scouting, and then they have this kind of built-in redeploy ability where they can actually pick up off the board and then come in alternate table edges. They go into strategic reserves, but they are so fast. So even if you're pulling on, they're coming in, turn 2 or 3 after you've picked them up, they're coming in off a flank, but they're quick, so they can still get where they need to go, put good pressure where they need to be, and again, good weapon platform, decent durability, being kind of a light vehicle.
They got a ton of
but pretty solid.
Yeah,
a lot of firepower. Yeah,
these are the hover trikes, right?
They put out a lot of firepower.
Say it again, Dave. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
they kill beasts.
For breakfast.
And they do it well.
They're targeting the wrong thing, but they're killing beasts. They are very cool. And somebody, when I was talking to John and playing John in the game, he was saying another guy in the club really didn't like the look of them. And I was like, I love the look of these things. I think they're like hover trikes, but I also think like the pads that they are hovering on look very much like the extensions of the ships in the Matrix, the Nebuchadnezzar ship. Like I can picture like the electricity playing off of them and stuff. I think they're awesome. Absolutely. I think they're super awesome.
And they're kind of an ode to the old squat trikes also. So again, that kind of evolution of the squat trike to now the Pioneer and the Hecaton Fortress from the land train. So it's neat that they're, paying attention to the past, but also taking it in a very different direction.
Yeah. I've seen some
conversions
as well of turning them from hover into a wheeled. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh really?
So,
I think I'd rather have them as the hover things. I mean, I don't care how cool the wheeled thing is, but the hover thing is just it's so cool for them. I chose the Chthonian Berserks, and they're not berserkers, they're berserks. Okay, so I'm not a huge fan of the models. I think the models are okay. I don't like the way the studio painted their version of them, especially the weapons. I don't like the way they did the weapons at all.
The lore for them is really interesting.
You cannot deny these guys in freaking close combat, though, dude. They are so in close combat they have a couple choices. They can take concussion mauls or heavy plasma axes, and the heavy plasma axe gives them kind of like Demon Princes. They get either a strike or a sweep, so they can do more attacks or fewer attacks at a higher AP and a higher strength. And then they get access to a twin concussion gauntlet. But I think where the real kicker here is honestly that concussion maul or the plasma axe. The concussion maul is AP -2, it's strength 9, and it does a flat 3 damage on a hit. And so they're hitting on 4-ups, but again, and we'll talk about grudgements as Dave calls them in a little bit. I mean, the minute you put a judgment on one of these guys, you're hitting it +1. And that's an interesting wording of that rule too. It's not you hit one, you're hitting one better on anything. So something that's requiring you now to hit on a 6, you're hitting on 5s. If you're required to hit on 4s, now these guys are hitting on 3s with these things. So, I mean, while the axe is great and all, it's going to do a flat 2 damage at a -2 AP versus 3 damage at a -2 AP with a strength of 9, and that strength is so fantastic on these units. I mean, I'm telling you, they wiped out my obliterators, and my obliterators are rocking around with 5 wounds, 7 toughness, and those hammers just made mincemeat out of them in one round. I was like, oh, he's like, well, this should do good. I go, yeah, I think it's going to do pretty
That's
good.
what they do.
And it did. It did. It worked. So I had real respect for them. Now, they're a bit of a glass hammer. They do have feel no pain, which is nice. But they're a bit of a glass hammer. But, man, when they hit, anything they hit, they're going to pretty much destroy.
That hammer will shatter and leave it that was impaled in everything nearby.
Yeah.
They're great.
They're so good. So good. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the army and how it plays, and in particular, we need to talk about your grudgements, Dave. Right off the bat, these are things you are putting onto under the current index rules. The army has access to Eye of the Ancestors, which gives you these judgment tokens, and as we talked about earlier, you can put 1, and then you can stack up to 2 on a unit. Dave, do you want to talk a little bit about what 1 does and then what 2
if you don't
does?
mind, I'm just going to jump back and talk about just quickly how they were introduced in the 9th edition codex. So with that, there were a list of things that your opponent could do during the game that would cause them to get a judgment token. I did mention before the show that I think it should be judgment.
I like it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm calling it from now on.
Let's see how far we can spread it. But there are a number of different things, but it almost had the feeling of that The Simpsons, the old guy, spitting out your gum. That's a paddling. Do like you could. Is there a unit that's claiming objective points from being on an objective? Good for them. So it became quite ridiculous, but you could also have 3 stacked on there, and they worked a bit differently. There was the first one meant that unmodified rolls of 6 to hit were an automatic wound. Second token meant unmodified roll of 5 to hit, automatic wound. 3 tokens, unmodified roll of 4+ to hit, automatic wound. Okay, so it went to the point I mentioned the plasma guns or the Volkite disintegrators that you can have on your Hearthguard. You go, okay, well, if I want to kill vehicles or Terminators or something like that, obviously the higher strength weapon is going to be better, right? When you've got that mechanic in there, the higher volume of fire is going to be better. So you had Volkite disintegrators taking out masses of troops. So this is why initially everyone's like,
Amazing.
"Oh my god, these guys are so crazy." So that's how they started. You could have three. The judgment tokens did different things, and you could get them for coughing rum. Like if you step back, if you're drinking the wrong brand of soda, you got a judgment token.
That's a paddling.
That's a paddling.
Yeah.
So now in the index,
they errated that pretty quickly, to my recollection. Also,
well, yeah, one of the fun things when they first, so I've got it all here on the cards. Finding the army rule. There we go. So the first one was each time your enemy unit destroys a Leagues of Votann unit from your army, that enemy unit gains one judgment token. Enemy unit can never have more than two judgment tokens, and if you have one, it's +1 to hit. If you have two, it's +1 to hit and +1 to wound. So that's a huge shift from that initial roll, but a lot of the stats didn't change too much. So it went from being overpowered to all of a sudden being quite underpowered as an army, because the bulk of the structure, the gaming structure, worked around from having those judgment tokens. And then, as I said, they errated it very quickly, and it's now at the start of the game, depending on the game size, you can pick you have a certain number of units in your opponent's army that you can put 2 judgment tokens on. So for like a
right. Incursion, you can put it on 2 units. Strike Force 4, which is 2,000 points, and then Onslaught 6. And so if you choose wisely, like it's good.
It's one of the things
really
you can definitely see, and I'm sure you would have seen it during your game against John, is that when the army is focused on those units that have the judgment tokens, they feel quite strong against them. As soon as you're faced with somebody that you haven't put judgment tokens on yet, you're not hitting them as often, you're not wounding them as often. They're getting in the face a lot faster. So it's that's the very interesting sort of balance that it creates,
I do think the weakness of it is you have to lose a unit to gain a token. I mean, it seems pretty steep. That seems pretty steep. There should be some kind of, like, I as much as you joke, like that's a paddling, like I could see units sitting on an objective gain a token while they're on that objective, right? Like that makes a ton of sense. You know, it becomes difficult now to hold objectives against them. That would be a really interesting.
Well, the fun part is that
approach.
the Eye of the Ancestors is just how you sort of hand out the token. So that initial scrabbling here through the cards.
No, that's okay. Yeah, it basically describes what happens when you have 1 and what happens when you have 2 and how you gain them, which is by losing units at this point. So if my Terminators destroy a unit, I immediately gain a grudgment token against them.
That specific unit.
I'm going to keep calling them grudgment tokens.
Yeah.
Yep. And there's no way to get rid of it. Like, you've got it. That's it.
But the other so the detachment rule, so the Oathband detachment, the only detachment that the Votann have at the moment, 10th edition, is at the start of any of your command phases. So at the start of the battle, select 1 unit from your opponent's army. That unit starts the battle with 2 judgment tokens. So it's one of those units that actually, I think the way that they've switched it now, the way the update works now is that if an opponent's unit has 2 tokens on it and you destroy it, if you destroy it by the start of the first or second command phase, start of your second command phase, you get 3 command points. And
if at the start of your command phase any of those units have been destroyed, you gain a number of command points depending on how early in the battle you destroyed it. So if you destroyed it in the first or second round, you gain 3 command points. If you destroyed it in the third or fourth, you get 2. If you destroy it in the 5th, you get 1.
But
those command points
with
are
that,
valuable.
as soon as you've scored command points in that way, that doesn't matter for the rest of the units. You can destroy another unit, you don't get any more.
Right.
Not like you've got a bank of
right.
You don't get 6. You don't get 12 command points.
So that's another great thing, because the Votann are fairly sort of command point hungry. But it's a way to use those judgment tokens to do that. So what I'm super curious about is how the other detachments that they'll get, how that changes.
It's going to be interesting.
So obviously you won't have that rule. You'll have a different rule. Will it be focused? Some of them will be focused on judgment tokens, I'm sure. Some of them won't. But it'll be great. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I found so and just to reiterate, so when you have one judgment token on you, the Votann any Votann that are attacking that unit now that has the single judgment token, they are hitting it +1 on their attack roll. When you have two on you, they are hitting it +1 and wounding it +1. So if you're relying on toughness to hold you out at that point, and I mean, think about that. These low toughness guys that are now hitting you, and you have their +1 to wound. If they're needing a 6 to wound, now they're needing 5. And usually those guys are throwing a lot of attacks. So it's like all of a sudden, if this applied to Tyranids in the game I just play, those scrabbling Tyranids at my my Land Raider that needed 6s to wound, all of a sudden need 5s, and that's a huge difference in the game. And so it does become very, very like I became very aware that my Land Raider was suddenly a little more vulnerable than elsewhere. And again, this was the only army that's destroyed. Now, mind you, had to throw everything at it to destroy it. But arguably, he threw the wrong things at it the wrong time. So, but my point being, like, anything that had one of these tokens on it, I was like, oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and as a player, when you think, oh, no, it's like your opponent's probably in a good spot. So, yeah, exactly. And the best games are when you're going, oh no, and your opponent's going, oh no, so it was an interesting mechanic, and it was super thematic and super fun to see and play. Had he brought out more of his stuff on the table, I think I would have been in a little more trouble than I was in. Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, I just think that's a really fascinating aspect of the army. I'm very curious to see how it evolves when the codex comes out, and as you said, when the detachments come out, that's the real bread and butter for the uniqueness of the ways to play the army. Because right now, I'm using one Veterans of the Long War, or whatever the detachment is that I'm using for my Black Legion, which is appropriate. But there may be times I want to dip into another one just to play around with it. And it gives me a lot of variety in the way that the army plays. And I hope to see the same thing for Votann.
I was going to say,
in terms of Black,
look at as well as enhancements and stratagems and how they interact with that. So things like there's the Wayfarer's Grace enhancement. First time the bearer is destroyed, after placing a judgment token next to the unit that destroyed it, roll 1d6. At the end of the phase, 2+ it and set the guy back up. Here we go. A long list. This is the one I was looking for. Each time a bearer's unit destroys an enemy unit, if that enemy unit has one or more judgment tokens, you can select one other enemy unit that is visible to the bearer. That unit gains 1 judgment token.
Oh, so you transfer one of the judgment
tokens.
That's
guilty
pretty
by
nice.
Association.
We got you. Who's next on the list? You.
Yeah.
I hate you all. And this is cool because, I mean, didn't the dwarves in fantasy have the Book of Grudges? Yeah, so this is super in keeping with that too. I love it.
One thing as well, the Carl character is kind of the generic sort of military leader. At the beginning of the command phase, he can spot a unit within line of sight. So where is it? Grim Efficiency. Once per battle round in your command phase, you can select one model from your army with this ability, then select one enemy unit that is visible to that model. That enemy unit gains a judgment token. So you always have at least in your
That's
army.
Interesting. That's interesting. And I'm telling you, as an opponent of these guys, you don't want those judgment tokens.
No.
You really don't. Especially savvy players who are good at threat assessment and know, okay, you know, that thing needs to die. I'm going to put 2 on that. I'm going to put 2 on that. I'm going to put 2 on that thing. Like anything that you're relying on for toughness or difficulty to hit, all of a sudden you're yeah. So like I was very well aware that like my Land Raider was at risk. If he'd put it on my Forge Fiend would be at risk. Can't remember what else he put it on. But I was super aware of that right away, that
a little bit of trouble.
I might be in a little bit of trouble. If I look at this over here so that you're not looking at that.
Yep.
So let me distract you with these other things back here. So moving on. In terms of Black Library representation of these, not a lot yet. Honestly, I found one short novella, and I mean it's short, that features the Leagues of Votann in Black Library. It's called 1 Million Years, and it's actually Necrons versus Votann. And it starts off pretty interesting with this Necron ship that like dives in and mines suns. And it's like going into the different layers and like mining out the sun for all its plasma energy, and then coming out, and as it's coming up, it runs into this massive Votann ship. It's like, hey,
we needed that.
Things continue from there. Yeah, but it's again, for 40K, it's a bit of a dense read because it's told from the Necron perspective primarily, but it's got some pretty fascinating stuff in it, even for Necrons and for Votann. So, and then the supporting supplements for this, the Kill Team Termination is sold out now, so you can't get that. But as usual with these kill teams, they've then released the Hearthkin Salvagers as a separate kill team, which is still in production. You can still get it, and that is a great looking kit. Have you picked up
Salvagers?
that kit,
Yeah. Yep. I think one of the units at the end.
Yeah,
will
that is
do that. But the Termination one has the Hearthkin, the Hernkin Jaegers, who are the basically the Hernkin pioneers off their bikes. They got still have the big.
Oh yeah.
Oh, nice. Oh yeah. With the duster coats,
but they're not available separately yet.
Yeah.
They will be in the future, but yeah, I'm excited. I have a Termination box picking up my FLGS on the weekend.
Very nice. Very nice. And then in terms of specialist game support, which we formerly called Forge World support, the Ironhead Squat Prospectors, and again, technically these are listed as squats, but I think they still qualify. The models look really cool. And if I'd known about these ahead of time, Josh, I might have done these for our Necromunda campaign.
Just wait for the Ash
now,
Waste.
and I think some of that has to do. I think some of that has to do with reading this. Oh, you know what? Ash Waste might not, or the new thing.
So to my knowledge, just as a disclaimer, like those, to my knowledge, are Necromunda exclusive. They are not available to Votann at all. They are completely separate rules, lines, etc. Just to clarify.
But you could look at them and potentially use them as a proxy for another unit if you wanted to figure out something. If you like the look of them, right? And I think there's also a prospector individual character.
Yeah, two now. Two brothers.
Yeah. I want to use a second master.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, nice. Yeah. It would look uniquely different, right? So, in kind of summary, what is it about the army that makes it fun and makes it unique? And I'll throw my points out, and I think Josh should throw his, and Dave, I think you should have the final word on this because you actually play them. I think it's a unique looking army, and it has some great lore.
Yeah.
Like the lore on this army is way deeper. I'm always impressed with. Let me back up. While I may not be always impressed with the way the lore is written, and that can vary vastly from codex to codex. This is one of the things I loved about the old Forge World books, and Alan's writing in particular. I thought it was really gritty and grim. Sometimes I feel like the codexes are written kind of comic booky a little bit comparatively. I will say, and I said it earlier, like the lore here is it's a bit of what was the term I used for the
dense.
Reading of it? It's
it's dense. Yeah.
It's dense reading. It's written pretty well. I mean, in that regard. And the lore, like the underpinnings of the lore, the actual core of it, no pun intended, is fascinating. Like it's a fascinating look into a part of Warhammer 40K that we haven't seen really before, and I'm all for it. Like I'm in for it. I think it's suitably grimdark. I think it is fascinating, and I think it is it has tons of opportunity. I'd love to see Black Library delve into these guys a bit, because I would be reading some of that too. And then looking at your notes, like, and based on my one experience in playing them, I agree with what you guys have said there. So I'll leave the kind of commentary there on how the thing actually plays to the others. Josh, why don't we go to you?
So I think one of the cool things that makes this armor unique is they're just high toughness across the board. Like they're again, back to the lore, like they're designed genetically from a genetic level to, you know, have denser bone structure, more musculature, things like that. Yeah. They have like void sealed organs, so some of the clone scheme guys can just like operate in void without a suit, which is pretty unique for a living, breathing race. High toughness, cool weapons. The technology that they put into their weapon development is especially interesting. And then there's just potential for lots of bodies and high volume of fire with that. Like if you want to make an infantry heavy list, I think you can absolutely do that with this army, and it's pretty viable as long as you can get up to that kind of short to mid-range engagement. Mid-range. Even the vehicles, though, as we talked with the Pioneers and the Land Fortress, like they obviously can deliver and they're fast, but they are huge weapon platforms in and of themselves. So just potential for lots of guns and lots of bodies, and they look cool, which, as you mentioned, they're a pretty unique faction, which is neat.
Yeah,
I agree with all that too. Dave, you get the final sound.
Basically, very similar things to Josh there. The strength is in its volume of potentially like dangerous firepower, and its weakness is that it's short range. It's 18-inch range. You're fighting best when you're between 12 and 18 inches away from your opponent. And your opponent's going to realize that very quickly and closer than 12 inches, which is where you're not so good. So the general thought, even though you've got that high toughness and the void armor, don't push yourself too far forward. You've got to. That's that very, very careful sort of cat and mouse game that you've got to play. Which for me is an exciting game to play, because it's like, oh, am I going to make a mistake here? I'll do it anyway. These guys are bound a glorious last stand.
Yep.
All those sort of things that you got to go through, the decisions you got to make along the way.
Yeah. That's a fascinating point, and it reminds me of one of the things John and I were discussing after we played, which I said, it seems to me this army is it requires a bit of finesse to play. It's much like the Eldar, certainly more so than now, but how the Eldar used to be. It used to be you had to have the right unit in the right place at the right time to do what you needed to do. I think this army has more finesse than, say, my Black Legion Chaos Space Marine army, which is like, the fighty things do the fighty stuff, and then you shoot with the shooty things back here, and you're constantly rolling your for your dark oaths or whatever it's called, we're dark packs, which I love, and I just I'll do it, I'll do it all day, 6 up, probably, on 2 dice most times, I cause a few wounds in there, but I mean mine is I think it requires probably a little less mind energy than these to play, and so I think it makes for a fascinating fascinating take on an army. And last but not least, I'd really like to take a look, Dave, at your army that you have painted, because you're the first person I knew who had one painted in full, and just listen. You were talking about, I saw earlier you were saying how your painting skills plateaued at a certain point, and you're okay. I'm like, your plateau is way up here, and mine is down here. I'm struggling to reach your plateau at the moment, but let's take a look real quick at what you have produced here. And so for those who are listening on audio, there's a great visual representation here. And Dave, I hope you don't mind. I'll share all these pictures in our Facebook group as well. Yeah, but just some fantastic looking, and your color scheme here. Why?
So initially, I saw the Great Arthurian League scheme, and I thought, oh yeah, great, white armor, green fatigues, that's awesome. I sort of saw it somewhere, and then I didn't see it again, and so in my mind, it was white armor, and it was more of a impactful green kind of thing. When you go and look at it now, it's like, oh, actually, that's like an off-white, a greenish off-white for the armor, and a very desaturated green for the fatigue. But I was walking around my neighborhood one night, and I saw a car. I can't remember what type of car now, but basically it was a two-tone. The roof of it was white, and then the lower part was like a jade.
Must have been a Toyota.
It's probably why
I keep doing that.
Toyota something. one of those sort of mini SUVs. But yeah, I just love that jade and white combination. So I just lamped hard into that for these guys.
Yeah. It looks fantastic.
Right there.
This is the kill team unit right here. Yeah, this looks fantastic. Yeah, it's a beautiful choice.
Super cool. That unit's really nice. I love those too. But the here we go. So in this photo here, we've got a conversion of the on the left is a conversion of the Carl. They used to have a high Carl. I'm sure you heard that joke a lot. Hi, Carl.
Well, every time I hear you with your accent in particular, at first when you said, "Oh, this is the call unit," and I'm like, "Did he just say this is my unit?"
So yeah, it's my high Carl on the left. On the right is my conversion for the Grimnir. But this is the code right model from the Caradron Overlords from Age of Sigmar.
Neat.
How funny that you leaned into an Age of Sigmar model, a fantasy dwarf, to bring a science fiction dwarf, but him holding the tablet,
super
the computer tablet looks really cool. But that's so funny that you had to go to a fantasy to get because it was too fantasy.
So the corvs that he's got, sorry, if you just go back to him. So he has the on the code right has two sort of speakers that come up over his shoulder, and I cut those off and use those as the sort of central body for the core conversions, and then those shoulders that it's got are cut from Space Marine backpacks. So,
and you are a conversion maniac.
Yeah,
this is
in the game he adds adds 1 toughness to the unit that he's with. So it takes them from toughness 5 to toughness 6. It's like, I'm going for that, please.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
that is pretty nice. Nice. And these are the definite StarCraft influenced looking models.
Yeah, definitely. And I did that those shoulder, the plates at the front of the shoulder, putting the jade green on there, so that I've got.
They're beautiful. Yeah, this is where you were talking about they're all one color, right?
One color, and like painting models white.
Yeah,
it's like I don't want them to look like stormtroopers.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
These
I like that the mix in
stunning,
gray you had on those guys too, just to break up all the white.
Yeah, down on the legs. Yeah.
So
and we just saw him. And here it is. These
the Pioneers.
I think
those are cool.
Look great.
Yeah, I love them. I love the fact that they've got those cool jackets, fur-lined dust.
Yeah. For aviator jackets, but also the fact that you're piloting this trike, but then you have this giant gun, this huge pistol at the same time. So you're doing a little drive-by while piloting. Yeah. Those are nice.
Well, that was the interesting thing in our game. John kept saying, he would shoot and he'd go, well, and these guys have pistols. I go, well, you're in range. I go, shoot your pistol. He goes, well, yeah, but the chances. I go, dude, a wound's a wound. I go, throw all your dice you can at something. I don't care if you're throwing a pistol at a Land Raider. Give it a shot. What else are you doing with it?
If you're close enough to shoot a Land Raider with a pistol from these guys, you're too close. Way too close.
You're too close.
But I love them.
Oh, here it is.
Oh,
here we go.
The back end of my hecaton,
couple
the
angles
side of
on
my
this
head.
guy here.
Yeah. Oh, I did see that. I saw the.
This is the Hecaton land fortress, yes,
and that's the heavy Magna Rail cannon on top. That's the shot.
Oh, it's so cool looking. Again, something I didn't initially care for, but now I'm like, I'm all in on, you know. I notice that I do that a lot with 40K models. It's something will come out. Look, the corn lawnmower thing is still one
that one still hasn't
I will
grown.
rail against till I'm done. But that one's never going to grow on me. But this is, is awesome.
I love it. I've got 2 of those now, and
nice.
I've got heavy magna rail cannons on both of them. It might not be conventional wisdom, but it's my wisdom. When I hit, it will hit hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sagittars are great.
Sagittarius.
Yep.
Yeah,
and these are personnel carriers, right?
So you could.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah,
he had berserks
in. One of the things you can do is you can take a Hearthkin warrior squad and split them into 2 units and put 1 in each Sagittarius. You've got to have 2 available to put them in. So, and then they operate as individual units for the rest of the game. So,
they're really cool looking too.
Kind of like Razorbacks.
And then there's some more.
Just an overall stunning looking army. I mean, just some similar pictures, but there's your berserks.
That one was,
oh my goodness. Look at those 2 power fists. They're so
because
cool.
when I put them together, I didn't. I picked up the first thing and was like, okay, so I can put power fists or this weapon or that weapon. Okay, I'm going to go for this one. So I put it on, and then I went through and put the axes and concussion walls, and I was like, okay, so which model can I put the? Oh, really? I can only put the power fists on that first one. Okay, let me do some conversion work. So I converted the lady that's usually firing
that
the
looks cool.
mole mortar. We gave her the power fist.
Nice. I like double power fist.
And these exo suits are so cool on these guys.
So I've got the conversion beamers there. Those I saw something in the Leagues of Votann Facebook group the other day where it was like, oh, I hadn't thought about how that weapon works with that. What do you call it? Stratagem. I think it's the graviton gun. It's D6 shots. If you fire it with ancestral sentence is the stratagem. If your opponent has judgment tokens on them, every unmodified 6 that you roll to hit, it's sustained hits 2. So from a unit of 3, you could potentially get like something, just a ridiculous number of shots.
Yeah.
And just to correct you,
if your opponent has grudge on them. My bad. But yeah, it's some fair stuff. I have it. There we go.
Jeez. These are just amazing looking. I mean, the models
and
themselves
that's the other
are just
thing.
fantastic.
The graviton blast cannon is anti-vehicle 2+. So if you're taking and you're firing, you get the sustained hits. There's a lot of it's crazy. So yeah, they can do a lot of great stuff. But
yeah. Wow.
Awesome.
Just good
the
stuff.
more they're more Hearthguard there. That's my first unit. There's my Iron Master.
Yeah.
Is Cogs and Ironkin assistant.
So good. They're so unique. Like they're just such a unique army. And that's, you know what? I mean, again, I go back to that whole discussion I had with the design team, and they were like, well, you know, if we could find a unique way for them to play, and I think they've nailed it. Yep. I think they've really nailed it.
That's the Einherjar champion on the left and the Carl. Yep, Carl.
And me. With even less hair.
Gotta grow your beard out.
That's the champion you were talking about. That's the nasty one. God, and he, you know what? He looks like it.
Yeah,
he looks like it too.
He looks absolutely fantastic. And I'm, as I said beforehand, I'm now finally getting to work on my Ancestors' Wrath, putting it up to the screen. So this is this was a commemorative series Einherjar champion. So she's in a great pose. She's got her shield sort of resting on the ground, and holding on to it right. Right.
That's so good.
Yeah,
that's so good. It's so good. Well, all right. Let's do this. Let's take a short break. We'll just come back and then we'll close the show out. All right, we're back to close out the show. Dave, I just want to thank you so much for joining us for this. Honestly, it was part inspiration looking at your army that made me really want to finally dive into this earlier than I probably would have normally. I would have probably waited for the 10th Ed Codex to come out otherwise. Yeah. But
well,
it was great.
I'll send you some photos of the new models that I add to my army.
Oh man, I can't wait. I can't wait.
Yeah.
It's going to be good stuff. Dave, again, build, paint, play. You guys broadcast when you're on. You're currently off season. Tuesdays.
That's right. Yep. Tuesdays we do a live stream. Tuesdays we're on live streaming on YouTube. Tuesdays 7 p.m. till 9 p.m. Eastern. However that works out for everybody. We'll be back probably mid-July for season 5, but we've got, as I said, we've got 4 seasons. I would suggest not starting at the first one.
That's what I always tell people. You don't want to listen to episodes 1 through 30
probably
of the independent character.
Around the second season, but you can go back afterwards and laugh at everything.
It takes a while to find your voice and hit your stride, you know?
Yeah. I was going to say it takes a while for all the technical difficulties to be worked out.
Also that, especially live streaming.
It's amazing the stuff we're doing today that we weren't doing 14 years ago when I started this. You know, it's incredible. So it used to be very difficult to record somebody remotely. Now it's just a push of a button. It's super easy.
Yeah.
So, but Dave, thank you so much for joining us. And again, we will have you on. I'll provide a link in the show notes to the Art of books. And although the Kickstarter is over now for the next wave of them, you can still pick a lot of these up at various stores and such, and online distributors as well. So they are fantastic. They're fantastic. Super inspirational stuff. So
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Anything else you want to throw out there that I missed, Dave? Anything you got to plug?
No, I think that's probably it. I'm really terrible doing the plugs at the end of the show.
That's all right. That's all right. We got Adepticon coming up. I want to talk to you offline about that a little bit too.
Yeah, it's going to be super exciting. Very excited about that. Jake and I are going to be at San Diego Comic-Con at the end of July, doing some painting classes and that kind of thing. So if anybody happens to be at San Diego Comic-Con, come and check us out.
Nice.
And I'll be at Nova Open.
I'll be there too.
Nova Open?
Yeah, I'll be there for Table War Charities, helping support the autism education piece there. Cool. But I will have time to play games and that kind of stuff. So
I will not be there this year, but hopefully in future.
Cool.
That's right. You will be at Adepticon this year, Milwaukee.
Next year.
Be aware. The hotel block is going to open soon on that one in a couple weeks. So take a look at June 26th.
Your calendars.
June 26th.
1 p.m. Central Time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Probably.
You look, double check me there, but you want to be on top of that. So we've started making our plans over here.
And fingers crossed it's a breeze compared to every year it's ever been in the past, because there's so many more options right there.
Hopefully. Hopefully.
I think it's part of the block. There are 3 hotels rather than 1 hotel or 2 hotels. 3 hotels, and there's something like 1,100 rooms.
Yeah, it's going to be good stuff. It's going to be good stuff. Leave us reviews on iTunes if you would. We read them out when we get them, and we love to see them. Doesn't matter what country you're in. It's really funny when I suddenly see one from hey, this review from North Korea. I mean, that might be a bit of an exaggeration, but you never know. And as you know, we have a Facebook group, which is super supportive of people and their hobby and where they are, and they can ask questions. We have a Patreon, we have a Discord. You can find all that information at theindependentcharacters.com. But until next time, this is Carl.
This is Josh.
And this is Dave.
We're coming to you from the Astronomicon and elsewhere, where great things come in small packages.
And where the ancestors are watching.
And where grudgement tokens are handed out like candy.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us again, Dave. And we will see you in episode 240.
Bye.
This episode of The Independent Characters is protected by the Creative Commons license. If you have further questions as to its use, you can find information on the front page at theindependentcharacters.com.